Let's explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
We were sleeping. I've been sleeping. I've been turning away from a truth I wanted not to face. There is a wound that won't heal at the center of the galaxy. There is a darkness reaching like rust into everything around us. We let it grow, and now it's here.
How many men have you killed, Milo?
I don't know.
50? 100? Countless.
Countless has a nice ring to it.
And how many lives have you saved?
500,000. Population of King's Landing. Tell me if your precious Randy commanded you to kill your own father and stand by while thousands of men, women, children burned alive, would you have done it? Would you have kept your oath then?
Our time has come. We prepared. We grew stronger. While you rested in your cradle of power, you were trusted to lead the Republic. But you were deceived. You assumed no force could challenge you. And now, finally, we have returned.
The visions are clear now. I see possible futures all at once. Our enemies are all around us. And in so many futures they prevail. But I do see a way. There is a narrow way through.
It's not a prophecy. It's a story that you keep telling, but it's not their story, it's yours. They deserve to be led by one of their own. What your people did to this world is heartbreaking.
We gave them something to hope for.
That's not hope!
We have survived by hiding from them, by running from them. But they are the gatekeepers. They are guarding all the doors, they are holding all the keys, which means that sooner or later, someone is going to have to fight them.
I wish none of this had happened.
So do all who live to see such time, but that is not for them to decide. All we will have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us.
Forgive me. I did not see. I have failed you all.
You forbade me. Captain Armor, I do not know what strength is like that. But I swear to you, I will not let the White City fall. Our people failed. Our people. Our people.
I wish you good fortune in the wars to come. And now it begins.
No. Now it ends.
What's up, guys? Welcome to The Narrative, episode 54, Fortress America. We're going to talk about, I don't know, maybe we'll name it tonight. What are we going to call the new America? Is it going to be Greater America or like Macro America, Mag America? I don't know, Mega America? Mega America, perhaps? I like it. I like my own idea. Pretty good. We'll brainstorm it. Chat, feel free to jump in. Obviously, South America is becoming part of North America, and North America is just America. And we're going to probably discuss how that's going to go, how we're going to get there. And there'll be some actuals tonight, actual theorizing tonight. But as usual, it's about the narrative around these parts. And I think the events or the storylines of the last week resulted in... I think it was great storytelling, actually. I got to hand it to the writers. I've been saying on some shows for the last 6 months or so. Not that I was upset at anything that we were being told in the central narrative, really, but I felt like the writing was poor. I've spoken to Chris about this at length. Just, whether you think things are going well or poorly, there was a lot of reruns. There wasn't a lot of good flavor. The characters were getting a little stale. And then 2024, oh my God, 2026 rolls around and we've got Mad Lad Maduro. We've got Trump just doing devolution in other countries. I mean, it's pretty fun. It's good stuff. And, we've got a lot of domestic stuff going on as well. Some Minnesota Malians, all kinds of stuff going on. So I'm excited. We're 11 days into 2026, and I think the writing is much improved. But it's not stopping some people, even within the supposedly fifth-gen warfare, asymmetric, fifth-generation minded info war, Q community, truth community, people get their feelings hurt. And it's a little silly. So we're going to talk about some of that. We're going to try to, be honest about not knowing what's going on ourselves. But yeah, I think we're going to try to explore why we think it's a little silly that people get upset about some of the theories that we are forwarding about Venezuela and what may or may not be going on. As you guys are probably aware, my Patriots are playing right now. I think this is direct counter-programming. It is bullshit. It's a pretty tense game so far. But, I'm sacrificing fake sports ball to talk about fake narratives with you guys. So you should act accordingly, I suppose. And our sponsors for tonight's show, first up, our friends at Tamarack Garden. We use them in the Bright household. We use some of their products. My wife uses some of their products. And our son, who just turned 1 year old, uses some of their products. Are you looking for a better alternative to the over-the-counter drugstore medications? Tamarack Garden began from a parent's desperate need for safe and effective options for kids tired of toxic chemicals taking matters into their own hands. They began crafting medicine from weeds, wildflowers, and herbs, the original time-tested healers that modern medicine can't match. Packed with antiviral herbs to boost immunity and fight illness, Tamarack Garden has, for a limited time, their elderberry and rosehip syrup kit available. Not only is it delicious, no more battles with kids, and easy to make, it will keep you and your family healthy all fall and winter. Introducing Tamarack Garden's new baby line, clean, non-toxic, and gentle for newborns and moms, relieving cradle crap. I don't know if it relieves cradle crap, but it does relieve cradle cap. Cradle cap. Diaper rash, stretch marks, and postpartum pain. Visit tamarackgarden.com today. Use the promo code Badlands for $10 off orders over $50. Remember to eat your weeds. tamarackgarden.com, promo code Badlands. That's a 20% discount on orders over $50. Well, $10, but you know what I mean. If you spend exactly $50, it's a 20% discount. That's how good at math I am, even though Mrs. Bright says I'm bad at reading in the chat. That happens when you write 10,000 words in the last 24 hours. And we are also brought to you by the very timely Rise Attire, who I would guess is sponsored on the back end directly by the Sovereign Alliance. What is the Sovereign Alliance? The Sovereign Alliance are a collection of leaders and countries that are aligned not in the vision for their countries, but against a vision that has been thrust upon them. I believe that the Sovereign Alliance is less a battle for something and more a battle against something. They are against globalism, collectivism. They are against the rules-based international order.
Sovereign Alliance, the latest addition to Badlands Rise merch, available now at badlandsmedia.tv/rise.
badlandsmedia.tv/rise. This is a good time to grab Sovereign Alliance merch. And we don't have any Mad Lad Maduro merch yet. We haven't pulled the trigger on that, but I'm not saying it's impossible. If the writing continues to be this good, it may be necessary. And anytime I feel like we actually trigger people who will walk around proudly announcing that they believe there's a sovereign alliance that Russia is a leading part of, if you can get them triggered over a geopolitical theory, then I think that's an accomplishment. And we've accomplished that over the last few days. All right, my guest tonight, and I guilted him into it before the show, my guest next week on back-to-back narratives. The back-to-back with Alpha worked well. I've done back-to-backs with Ghost plenty of times. So we're going to do another one because Ghost had a bunch of ideas to get beyond just what we're talking about in South America and some of this stuff that we'll cover mostly tonight, to some more macro stuff in how to approach the info war. We're going to talk about some of that tonight for sure, but there's an idea Ghost has of kind of the labyrinth that we're going to get into more next week and kind of focus on that kind of Q adjacent, Q focused, 5th gen warfare focused. So before we get into tonight's topics, first of all, how are you? Have you done 14 streams in the last 3 days? And yes. Do you want to tease generally the labyrinth kind of idea you have that we're going to get more into next week?
Yeah. The way I looked at it was, this is something I've been thinking about, is kind of builds on, I mentioned before, like one of the last times I came on here, like the Fellowship of the Ring, like that whole idea. But the labyrinth was, if we as the public have been living in the middle of this maze, this labyrinth, and it's like a labyrinth of misinformation and lies, the truth movement, I think, represents a party venturing out to escape the labyrinth, right?
And when you're saying party, you're using nerd speak, not political speak. Party is a group of adventurers for anybody who didn't play Dungeons and Dragons.
Yes, exactly. And and like the trials and tribulations and all the things that occur, and the infighting, the tribalism, the difference of opinion, and then also, of course, the characters and figures and tricks and mysticism that you would come across inside a labyrinth. That are designed to bring you back to the center, right?
Damn straight. We'll get into that more. I just had to, Mrs. Wright wanted to talk a little bit of shit, so I needed to show that there. But it is true, can confirm, wherever the ghosts were, we didn't seem to get an invite, but it's fine. It's not like we're the labyrinth idea is a good one. You were in, if you wanted to disabuse people of the notion that you're some sort of either Fed or, in your case, maybe an anti-Fed, being in the Caribbean, circling islands, while the fake but real, but mostly fake, hyper real, I should say, Maduro op was going on while you were in the air.
Yes, I was Saturday morning. It's true. I flew down to the Caribbean, and we had to circle the islands for about an hour and a half after arriving there. And like every 10 minutes, the pot was like, all right, we'll be on the ground in like 10 minutes. And it was like an hour and a half later, we were still circling. And it was because apparently the airspace got shut down. So they diverted a bunch of flight, like the airspace, not just the airspace in Venezuela had already been shut down, but it was airspace like all around Venezuela got shut down. So they were diverting flights everywhere. So planes were coming in and landing. Right. So that happened, and I didn't really learn about it until we were on the ground. But I kind of suspected that that's what was going down.
Right.
So it was interesting.
That's a good place to start. I'll kind of lay out the rubric for tonight. Like Ghost said, we're going to kind of talk about this labyrinth idea for next week, and I wanted to think about that more too. That's also why I sort of wanted to table it a bit. I just know how our shows go. We probably will exhaust, Well,
10%. Venezuela should be the focus this time, and that the labyrinth is something different.
But I do want to get into that next time, and we are pretty direct. I think not everybody, but a lot of us at Badlands are pretty direct about how we each approach the info war. We're certainly pretty direct about what we don't like about other people approaching it, which is fine, right? I mean, everybody's an adult. People should have thick skin. You shouldn't be in this if you don't have thick skin. We certainly get criticized plenty, both by our audience and by others. And we've got no problem with that or with doing that in return. But I think tonight, before we get into, I want to get into some of the bigger picture of what might be going on. It's funny to say it's not big picture already, but some of the macro global picture that might be coming into focus on the back of Venezuela. And then if we have time tonight, I think we will. We're going to try to hit some of these other spots Trump is talking about, Colombia, Cuba, and Mexico specifically. But before that, I think it's actually good to start the discussion with acknowledgement. You were on DPH last night with John and Chris, and I watched about half of that, and thought it was good stuff. You were talking about basically Venezuelan devolution. So maybe you can give people a little bit of a condensed recap of just what that means, what your kind of theory is of what actually happened. Not the story necessarily, but your theory of what actually happened in Venezuela. And then I want to talk about basically kind of addressing why people, not just in our audience, but more so in the larger truth community and Q community, seem to be getting really upset about this idea, and whether or not you and we are right about this idea, kind of addressing why it seems so controversial to people in Trump world, or especially in the truth community. But maybe to start out, kind of what do you think overall is going on here with Venezuelan devolution?
Yes. So I think what was going to happen was there was going to be a civil war in Venezuela. And we now have Nicolas Maduro's son has said that publicly, that was the plan. We also have Gustavo Petro, the president of this is in the past week. This is both of these people have said this publicly in a speech at a rally they were holding, separate rallies in different countries. Gustavo Petro said that the president before him, Ivan Duque, who was a regime shill, he was anti-Maduro, anti-Venezuela. He's been all over the MSN saying that Trump's doing the right thing by talking about bombing Venezuela, going to war with Venezuela. He said that Ivan Duque was going to allow the deep state to come in and use Colombia as a staging ground to launch a land war into Venezuela, start a civil war, and overthrow the Venezuelan government. And that is a template that mirrors exactly what happened in Syria in 2011, where we used Turkey as a staging ground. Turkey's part of NATO, and walked weapons that we stole from Libya, from Gaddafi's armory, walked them into Syria, gave them to a bunch of mercenaries that we hired. And when I say we, I mean that the deep state hired, and then told them to go overthrow Assad. And that's how ISIS was created. It was they're contractors, mercenaries hired by the State Department to overthrow Assad. $2 trillion, according to the former defense minister of Qatar, who came out publicly and admitted all this on camera, because he said, I'm going to get blamed for all this. So I just want to lay it all out there that it wasn't just me. It was UAE, it was Saudi Arabia, it was Israel, it was Turkey, it was the USA, it was NATO. All of us working together. $2 trillion was put together to overthrow Assad, and somehow we failed. And then of course Putin comes back into power in 2012, and then he gets involved. And once Russia
after Russian devolution,
not
quite the same thing, but more of a technicality.
It kind of was Russian devolution, though. And so I think that's what was always going to happen. I think that whether it happened in 2025 or 2030, at some point that was going to happen. And the reasons are, there are a lot of reasons why it was going to happen. I think politically, Venezuela has always been a flippantly defiant political culture against, number one, Zionism, but everything that orbits around Zionism. Hugo Chavez was ardently probably the most pro-Palestine leader in the world when he was in power, to the extent that when Delcy Rodriguez, the current president of Venezuela, was sworn in, she was sworn in on his sarcophagus in this giant monument in Caracas where he's buried. And behind his sarcophagus is a Venezuelan flag next to a Palestinian flag. That is how pro-Palestine Hugo Chavez was. Maduro's the same way. Maduro, who was a Chavez lieutenant, he's very pro-Palestine and anti-Israel. So that's part of it for sure. But they also talk about the bankers. They talk about, all the things that we talk about. I have watched speeches for years now of Maduro saying all this stuff. And I've very recently now learned that Hugo Chavez was talking about it 20 years ago. And to the extent that I'm actually going to do Hugo Chavez on the Book of Trump tomorrow night.
That's going to be really interesting. I don't know a lot about Hugo Chavez, but it's interesting how the peeling back of the layers works when you're focused on these narratives and then the actuals that happen, because it starts to make you play the hindsight game a lot in really interesting ways. Like even on a US level, for me, reverse engineering the Trump era has made me interested in the Nixon era in a way, in an inverted sort of way, compared to what I was before. Obviously, as a liberal, but then even as like an InfoWar person, truth community person, when you start talking about the Uniparty, then you're like, all right, there's Trump, and then there's everybody else. But and then again, I'm not trying to say Nixon must have been this hero, but there's been enough comms out of Donald Trump himself over the years about Nixon that have made me be like, maybe there's a little bit more that Nixon was dealing with, not from a Republican Democrat lensing, but from the cabal versus the anti-cabal framing. But Chavez is another name, right? It's almost like a Nixonian name, more extreme in terms of the framing of South America, but kind of similar. Like he is locked into the collective mind, into the central narrative, which is history. Chris and I often talk about, and we talk about with you, the idea that history as we accept it is just yesterday's fake news. And, some of it may be true, some of it might not, but we've got to be able to apply this framing consistently. And if you invert a major narrative or a major character in the current war of stories, in your own mind, you have to trace the implications of that retroactively. And I think a lot of people in the info war are used to a lot of people in our audience are used to projecting forward based on narrative inversions and, asymmetric theories, the kind of theories that most in MAGA do not want to screw around with. But I think what we all need to work on is applying retrospect and hindsight to these inversions, because it starts to make our history as we've been told it look even faker, as we would expect. But ironically, to your point about Chavez, it starts to make everything that happened in the last, it starts to make the actuals make a lot more sense when you look at things through that inverted framing.
Yeah. And all these revelations that I've had, these these claims that I make about Islam, the deep state, ISIS, Al Qaeda, Maduro, Chavez, all of it. These are all positions that I had the opposite view of at some point, right? I mean,
right.
I wouldn't say I was ever really a neocon, because I was never really like gung ho about the wars, but I did, my parents voted for Bush. I was too young to vote for Bush. So I kind of tacitly supported Bush, but I kind of recognized he was kind of a buffoon.
You were in that paradigm, or at least
I was in that paradigm. Yeah. But I definitely
that was like me in the liberal paradigm.
Yeah, I definitely viewed Islam as the satanic, like Satan, like all that stuff. I mean, the stuff that all those people talk about, that the Zionists say. I was in that paradigm. I was in all of it. And it was humility in recognizing how wrong I was, because I went and, had moments where I was had this aha epiphany, oh, wow, that's not what I actually, I used to think it was the opposite. This one thing, it was one thing here, one thing there. And then you actually go and you scratch away and you start looking at it. And, Chavez, I'm still digging and preparing for the show tomorrow. But, I mean, it's looking more and more like it's a Putin situation where we were told that, brown man bad, like Chavez bad. And it's just because that's what the narrative was. And here actually is a clip of Hugo Chavez from 20 years ago. And look what he says. I'll turn it off because it's in Spanish. I'll read it. But he says,
La nación más
is the most aggressive nation in the history of humanity. They dared to drop atomic bombs on defenseless cities. There are Hiroshima and Nagasaki. What is that? They invaded Panama. They bombed and killed thousands. They burned an entire neighborhood to capture Noriega, that was the leader of Panama, accusing him of being a drug trafficker. And there he is in prison, the man who was president of Panama. I've received several warnings, even from some spaces that aren't really allies, just serious people who are concerned about the operation that is underway. designed in the Pentagon. It's a long-term operation. It's been in motion for years. Years ago, someone told me they're going to end up accusing you of being a drug trafficker, you personally, you Chavez, not just that the government supports it or permits it. No. They're going to try to imply the Noriega formula to you.
Wow.
Yeah. So and what he's saying is they're going to say that you're like the drug lord. He goes on to say like they're going to accuse you and say you're the drug lord. You're the head of the whole cartel, and the cartel exists because of you. Like that's what they're going to say, and that is now exactly what they've done in Nicolas Maduro 20 years later.
That's incredible. Not just that framing, but what I am really picking up on in the last week is and this is an old clip that you're bringing up, so it's even more incredible. What strikes me in that exchange is that he says they're going to apply the Noriega formula. So you can use different words. So I haven't seen that word used this week, but there are two words that I have seen used a lot in the last week by different players on the game board in response to the Maduro story. That is template and playbook. What's interesting is the word template is being used by people you and I consider to be sovereign alliance. Both China and Russia, leadership in China and Russia, have used the term template about what Trump did with Maduro. And they are specifically talking about applying that template to Ukraine and Taiwan, respectively. On the other side of the board, I've noticed a bunch of EU and what we would call globalist or NATO kind of a regime. Ironically, regime is becoming a charged word this week, which we'll also get into. I've seen people in the globalist regime using the word playbook to refer to what Trump did with Maduro, which is kind of funny because those are all the people that wanted Maduro ousted. And they are not talking about the Maduro playbook as a good thing. The first country in Europe I saw doing this week was Denmark, who are talking about it in relation to Greenland. And they are freaking out because they're saying Donald Trump just set a template with Maduro, and they're afraid he's going to use that, quote, playbook in Greenland, and admitting they can't do anything about it. So, that's why I use the term narrative convergence a lot, and I think maybe sometimes people think it's just like I'm just throwing a word out there. That is narrative convergence. I always say to me, the most signal examples of narrative convergence is when core concepts your quote-unquote side are deploying start to be deployed in the same framing by the enemy faction. So in the last week, we've got people like us and in this community looking at things from a 5th gen warfare perspective and using template, seeding, narrative seeding, all that kind of stuff about the Maduro template. And then we've got the enemy, the globalists, using the same thing publicly. Because, it's the Overton's Goalpost article I wrote 2 years ago, wherein when the enemy's narrative converges with your own, it's a sign that they're in a really, really bad position. When they have to start saying, Trump just set a template here, we're saying the same thing. But they're just going to invert what the meaning is, right? They're just going to say it's bad. So I think that clip is not only great for the reasons you point out, that it's like, okay, looks like we might have to retroactively apply what we're looking at here to Chavez, but the fact that he is saying there's a template that's going to be used against him. And the reason I started this show, and as Chavez is saying right there, what is the template? Is it first actual or is it first narrative? It's always narrative first. So he's saying he's not saying they're going to do something to me. He's saying they're going to tell a story about me using the same template that they used on Noriega. And what follows the narrative? The actual. Because the whole point of the narrative, for better or worse, and both sides use it, which is kind of why this is a good discussion tonight to have with the truth community, is that the actuals follow the narratives. The reason the narrative is more important, and I will not get off of that soapbox, is because the narrative is necessary to cultivate the mandate for the actual that follows. If you do not have the story, you do not win the war. That is the way it is. If you start with the actual and then you tell the wrong story to translate that actual, you lose. You lose the people, you lose the narrative, which is a little hint of what I think is going on from a narrative perspective. But yeah, from an actual, I think, something we talked about in chat before you came on the show that I think you really wanted to get across there, you started to, is admitting that we don't know the truth of what's going on. And I think it's a little strange that we're in this position in 2026 where it feels like we have to say that more often than we had to say that a few years ago, because people in a community that was supposedly founded on asymmetric ideas, nonlinear thinking, basically being told you're crazy if you're into the Q drops or any of this kind of stuff or know there's an info war going on, we've got to explain that we're proposing an alternate theory because it's hurting too many people's feelings, because all they're doing is looking at word for word what Donald Trump is saying, and however they want to interpret that, they're interpreting that right now.
Yeah. And, this was something that I kind of anticipated. I didn't, obviously I didn't quite seeing things unfolding this exact way, but I knew that the team was going to be broken up, so to speak. The movement was going to break up. I said this for years. I said that going back even to Trump 1.0, I was saying this like online, and just like random forums and stuff, that if you look at what the definition of a coalition is, it says it is a temporary alliance for political advantage. Like where interested parties come together for a moment in time to accomplish something, and then they disband. And I said that, once Trump comes back, now I thought maybe it would be after Trump, did all the stuff, right? Like roll credits, like ticker tape parade. And then, and then after the credits roll, then we all go our own way. But it looks like that's happening first. And maybe that's for the best, because I think there's a lot of like enemies embedded throughout the movement who are masquerading, wolves in sheep's clothing. But when you look at, the way people are talking about this, you're right. Like, we don't know what's going on. There's no way to possibly fully fathom what's going on, because obviously there's going to be like classified stuff, like the national security, all that kind of stuff. But then there's also just mis and disinformation, going out and finding this stuff, like tracking down the information, like actually finding the clips, finding the reports, and then having it shared and disseminated so we can have a discussion as like a community and be like, all right. What actually makes the most sense here? That's not really even happening to the way it should be, because everyone's just kind of accepting what's being shoveled in front of them and saying, well, we're being told this story, so that must be what it is. I mean, it's coming out of Donald Trump's mouth, so that must be what it is. There's no reason to go dig further and go find facts, because who needs facts? We have the storyteller telling us the story. But as Chris says, and I think he's absolutely right, Trump is not just communicating with us, he's communicating with the enemy. And actually, I think he's probably communicating with the enemy more often than us right now.
Well, I totally agree with that. And what I want to do is run down a list of contradictions to me. And this is kind of, we're going full narrative tonight and full 5th gen warfare. And this is the only audience, the Badlands audience, I am confident, is the only audience that can do that. So when I say we're going to examine contradictions, we're going beyond examining contradictions tonight in the central narrative. That's why these theories first start to percolate in the first place in a mind like Ghosts or in any of ours. When we look at the central narrative, whoever is speaking in it, in whatever they are saying, we don't automatically assume that what they are saying is exactly what's going on, right? Whether they are good or bad, whether we like them or not. We know there's 5th gen warfare going on. For God's sakes, the 4th PSYOP group in the US military is putting out propaganda on like a quarterly basis with highly produced trailers telling you that they are actively engaged in psychological operations on the American people.
Yeah.
Like, now, I believe that their intentions are good, and I want to get to, on the back of the Maduro narrative, a defense of those psyops. Because while I do agree with Chris's assertion and John, those are probably the two that push this the most, while I do agree with them that the goal is to not want to be psyoped anymore, I ultimately believe the choice to not be psyoped is each and every one of ours, right? And I also can give a lot of damn good reasons using this narrative, the Maduro narrative, as a template for why they absolutely feel a logical reason why they do have to engage in these sort of psyops. And it's not to protect people's feelings. So we'll get to that as well. But before the contradictions that I want to run down, the one you just brought up is a great one, which is that you kind of touched on it. The thing that I think can drive me a little crazy in the truth community is not what people believe about this, but why they say they believe it. So you just said, hey, whatever Donald Trump says, that's my guy. I'm gonna back whatever he says. The principle of that stance makes total sense to me. You trust Donald Trump. I don't think it's stupid to trust Donald Trump. The problem is you, the proverbial you I'm going to invent right now, you routinely, daily invert things that Donald Trump says to fit whatever you want him to mean, and you do it. You know you do it because all of us have done it in the past, and all of us do it all the time. The difference is some of us are honest about the fact that we do that, and some of us catch ourselves doing that. Some of us look at Donald Trump saying something about Vladimir Putin, like me, and go, I believe in the sovereign alliance. That is automatically the framing I apply to what he is saying. But I try to be honest about that. And my frustration is there's a lot of people who are like, well, Donald Trump said Maduro's a bad guy, so that's why I think he's a bad guy. And in the next True Social post, that person is going to say Donald Trump is engaged in kayfabe with Vladimir Putin, or pick your character, right? And I think that's the first contradiction, is that people are applying basically non-fifth gen terminology, or framing rather, to Donald Trump's communications when they want, and then fifth generation framing when it's convenient for them.
Yeah. And I mean, so think about it like this. Back when Biden was president, right? The reason that we were all on the same team is because we all had the common enemy, like the character that was put right in front of us, which was the Biden administration. I mean, it was the deep state, but it was personified in the character of Joe Biden, right? And so we all were in opposition to this one character, which kind of, even though we all recognized that we come from different places and we all, got to this place, different journeys, we're all on the same team here, going in the same direction. And we basically just opposed every single thing that Biden was doing, right? That the deep state was doing to us when they were in power. But I think everybody generally understood at that time that when the entire deep state, like when their entire controlled opposition dynamic, were in agreement on something, then then our ears should perk up and we should be like, wait a minute, the Republicans and the Democrats are in agreement on this thing.
Hold up.
Yeah, we should probably examine it and understand why they're in agreement on this one thing. We have completely, as a movement, completely abandoned that now with Trump back in office. And I don't know why exactly that is. I guess people kind of just see Trump in the White House and they're like, well, the entire government is now white hats now because obviously Trump, is president, ignoring everything that happened in the first term, and how all these subversive elements within the government were doing everything they could to stop Trump. The reason the wall didn't get built, by the way, I mean, this is lost on a lot of people because they weren't paying attention in 2016, 2017, 2018. But the reason the wall didn't get built in the first 2 years of Trump's presidency, when the Republicans controlled every element of our government, was because Paul Ryan and John McCain stopped it, and the Republicans stopped the wall from being funded. There was a moment where they were about to abolish Obamacare, right? And then John McCain walked in at midnight and cast the final vote and said, no, we're not going to abolish Obamacare, and then walked out. And that was the moment that I think most people who were reluctant to call John McCain a traitor and were mad that Donald Trump said that he was a piece of shit, basically, they were finally like, okay, maybe John McCain is a piece of shit. Yeah, and it's that happened. You can't deny that it happened. It happened right in front of us. But we forget about all this. And so then now it's okay, we're just going to ignore all of that. We're going to ignore everything we've been trained to do, conditioned to do, right, over the past 10 years. We're just going to throw all that out. And then when the fourth PSYOP group puts out a video that basically is hey, you're in the middle of a battle space and this is war, and we're engaging in warfare right now, as you're watching this. I think the people who like were tracking Q and all this stuff, fifth generation warfare, they think that message is somehow not directed at them. It's like they're in on the joke. Like they're like observing the psyop, like they're sitting next to the 4 psyop group guys, eating the popcorn, watching the movie with them. And it's like, dude, do you understand that, like my family doesn't even know that video came out. They don't even know what the 4 psyop group is. They don't care. That video was for you. Yeah, that video is for you to let you know that they're running these operations against you and against everyone around you. Like you are absolutely the target of these operations for better or worse.
That is a great way to frame that. And that's a really good point. Who those PSYOP group videos are targeted at. And you're right, though, because even a lot of Q people, a lot of truth community decoders, etc., look at that. And even if they do believe what you just said, that the videos are targeted at them, they do think like, I'm sitting in the movie theater next to the guys directing it. Like, no, motherfucker. You're in the movie. Yeah. You're in the movie.
You are the movie. Yeah.
You are an actor. And that word, it gets so misconstrued in the framing that a lot of people in this community use to apply to the quote unquote movie. When I say actor, I'm using it in a very literal term, not a movie actor. I'm saying an actor, somebody who acts upon events on a narrative or an actual level. If you're somebody who has a following or you don't, you're just engaging in the info war in a direct manner, which everybody in this audience is de facto, and everybody who knows there's such a thing as a truth community, one of the things I always say is, if you use the term info war, you're engaged in the info war. To Ghost's point, though, that doesn't mean you're engaged in the right direction. And I think I agree with you that I think some of those reminders by the 4th PSYOP group, by the Patriots, etc., and even some of these hat tips that I think people are picking up on, trust the plan, all these kinds of things, like these are real comms, right? My issue comes in how people interpret what those comms are designed to do. And if you do not think you're being acted upon or provoked in any certain way, then you're probably one of the people that is being most provoked. And I would argue that the PSYOP group, etc., they don't want you to be moved by their ops. And that, it also is something I've talked about for a few years that I've been meaning to write about, but just haven't. Is that this thought was prompted by watching Christopher Nolan's Tenet a few years ago. It's a much longer discussion, but the short version is one of the prime ways I've begun to think about the Q drops in hindsight, to use your framing about, people who read the drops and engaged with those being in the PSYOP, basically being targets of the PSYOP, is I've really started to look at the drops as a moral deployment as well, right? Obviously, they were an information deployment. That's by definition what they were. Do I think that the truth community has had a positive effect overall on kind of forwarding the Overton window, moving the information more in the right direction? Yes, I definitely do think it has. But I think there's a secondary layer to the intent behind the drops, and I think it kind of hits on what you're saying. If we are adult enough to understand, if you engage with Donald Trump and you think he speaks in code, you think he speaks to multiple audiences, you think he engages in kayfabe, this hurts people's feeling. But what you are saying is you are very well aware and directly approve of Donald Trump lying to you every day, all day. Okay? That's what you're saying. And we can be adults and admit that that's happening and that we think it's a good thing and that we think it's necessary and we understand why he's doing it. So then if you take the Q drops that spoke directly to the people, the choice to no refrain is my favorite one from the drops and the one I think about the most. The more kind of frictional the info war becomes. Choice to know. First of all, to your point about the PSYOPs videos, you had to find or seek out the drops to begin with. Like there was no accidental way to become involved in that stuff. You might have heard of them, but to become involved in that stuff, you had to engage directly, right? So that's kind of a choice to know thing. But more so on a moral framework, I think that Patriots, there were internal qualms, and we know this from the drops. We know that they didn't always agree with each other on what the right move was in terms of info ops. You can guarantee that whoever's in these skiffs and whoever drafted this whole plan, they don't all agree about every aspect of that plan. And I actually think that part of the deployment and part of this decentralization of the operation on a macro scale was to not tip their hand in a way that would destroy the plan, the quote unquote plan. It was also to activate the community. But I think a big part of it was to absolve themselves of a lot of the moral issues behind engaging in these psyops on the American people. I think a lot of them were saying like, well, we're going to have to engage in these psyops in order to disentangle a lot of this new world order, a lot of the central narrative. But we need to give the American people the choice to know that this is what we're doing.
Yep.
So, and I don't think anybody basically in the Q community talks about that. I don't think they talk about the morality at all. They just excuse everything. And it's okay if you believe that it's a moral operation. I believe it's a moral operation, but I actually think that that's encoded into the operation, that the Patriots knew this is a gray area. This is not just a constitutional gray area. This is a moral, human gray area of whether or not the side of good should engage in psychological operations on the American people. So I totally agree with your framing of the PSYOP videos, but I would extend that to the drops themselves and say, hey, maybe those PSYOP videos are them trying to be like, guys, remember, we told you that we're going to be lying to you just as often as we're not. So you got to stop just reposting word for word tweets and just saying there's no other possible reading of what's being said here.
Eric Rice, who Ash and I have done some shows with, G Money is the one who introduced, put him on my radar. Brilliant guy. Probably one of the few, if not the only person I've come across who I felt like really had a full, well-rounded, just had researched all of it. It like had the Matt Ehret knowledge, had the Zionist knowledge, had like all of it. Like he just knew all of it. We don't agree on every single point, but necessarily. But one of the things he said to me that has really stuck with me is he kind of dismisses the idea of lying and deception as something that's positive. And he's like, look, if you're like lying, like you are doing what the Bible says not to do, you're doing something immoral. We should not be lying. We should not be accepting leaders that lie to us. It doesn't matter what the intent is. And to some extent, he's right, but it's also, fifth generation warfare and, lies as opposed to bullets. I mean, lies are a lot better, in my opinion. Like a deception psyop is a much better, more moral weapon than a bomb, right? So
absolutely.
If we can diffuse a conflict and prevent it from going kinetic by engaging in deception and psyops, I would say that is more moral than just allowing it to fall into violence. So I think you're right. My final point on that would be, if you are, if an influencer, like if your favorite podcaster right now is in total agreement with Barack Obama, George Bush, Fox News, the entire MSM, John McCain, Nancy Pelosi, all of them, like in agreement with all of them, Lindsey Graham, all of it. And the thing that they're agreeing on is a new war, like a new forever war with another country. Might want to reevaluate, like that person should really reevaluate their thinking. If they're out there cheering right now, like that we should go bomb Iran, like if your favorite influencer is out there posting, like frothing at the mouth, like, yeah, world police, we're going to go bomb Iran. Man, have we really lost the plot? And have we deviated? Because 2 years ago, nobody in the truth community would have ever posted something like that. And yet here we are. There are people who are earnestly talking about bombing Iran and how that's going to be a good thing. And starting a war with Iran is actually going to be good because Iran is evil. What? Like, where is the national security imperative there? There is none. And I've watched it from every angle, looked at it from every angle, even if you're of the belief that we have to protect Israel and Israel's our greatest ally and all that bullshit. Iran is not attacking Israel. They had every opportunity to go to war with Israel and blanket Israel with hypersonic missiles, and they chose not to. So, where is the national security existential threat, like imperative? And it's just not there. So you're basically advocating that we're going to go bomb a foreign country because it's going to satiate your bloodlust, and you don't have the courage to just admit that you want to satiate that bloodlust because you have bought into the momentum of this zeitgeist that's like moving in that direction solely because Donald Trump appears to be supporting that, despite the fact that we have a 10-year history now of Donald Trump saying one thing and then at the last minute turning around and doing the complete opposite. And I can literally give you 15 examples off the top of my head. The number one example being Kim Jong-un and, little rocket man, we're going to go to war with North Korea. He better watch it. He has a button, but I have a much bigger button. And then May 2018, you know what? We're going to cancel the Singapore summit because he's fat and stupid and he said mean things about me. So see you later. And then guess what? He showed up at the Singapore summit on June 12th anyway. And that was when they walked out and he gestured in front of the flag. Total rug pull. But you know what? All of those people who are right now cheering for war with Iran were cheering for war with North Korea on June 11th.
Absolutely. Very well said. And I think, we're beyond the point of worrying about why we think the things that we do, because it's gotten so retarded out there that, and I think our audience can handle it. To your point there, I think there are two major issues with how people read these things, how these neocons read these things. And I say neocons to also extend to half of the Q audience in the last week, half of the truth community. Obviously it's not all of them. There's a lot of people who see through this shit and understand that, again, Trump is speaking to multiple audiences. Trump is using 5th generation warfare. So I would say on two levels, people are failing tests. There's an IQ test here, which is just people can only engage in I call it the permanent present. They can look at what Trump is saying today and what the story cycle is saying today, and they cannot project that forward. So nor backward, to your point. They can't look back and be like, man, what about the last time that Trump had this kind of rhetoric with one of these players? It's okay to sit there and say, I don't know how this is going to go. We don't know how this is going to go. We obviously have our theories of whether or not the story or the narrative is going to be actualized in the way that it's being seeded, but nobody knows which way it's going to go. So there's an IQ test element there of people not applying any previous framing that they've learned from previous rug pulls to the central narrative, the permanent present. The second test, though, is the one you're touching on, and that is the morality test. And the reason I get fired up about this is not because I think anything bad is going on from a narrative perspective right now. In fact, I think, and what I want to get to on this Venezuela topic, I think we see this the same way. Basically, I think the guys last night on DPH, John and Chris, seem to see it the same way. I think this is good. I think this has all been good this week. I think the narrative is good, or necessary, I should say. I think the actuals are great, which is why I want to talk about the Fortress America topic. But the morality test people are failing is there are a lot of people, whether they're Q commentators, MAGA commentators, truth community commentators. I'm not talking about public rhinos, public Republicans, or public neocons and Zionists. Those people are very out and open about what they are and have been the whole time. The people that are failing morality tests right now are the people that will endorse the idea of starting a war or kinetic conflict or mass loss of life. They'll endorse the idea of bombing a regime right now because that seems to be the narrative Trump is seeding. And the real problem is, after they're rugged, to your point on North Korea, they will just say, what a brilliant bit of gamesmanship by Donald Trump. What a brilliant psyop, right? And it's like, first of all, you failed the IQ test because you didn't see this shit coming. And as we prove every goddamn month, even though I just said we don't know exactly where it's going, we always know that there are rug pulls coming. And we're the only people that talk about it. Like Badlands are the only people that say this is probably a rug, and then it ends up being a rug, and then we try to explain why we think the rug happened. Where all these other people are like, oh, Trump said he's going to... Let's look at another example besides Iran. Trump said this past week, Petro is next. Yep. Colombia is next. I'm coming for your ass. I mean, to your point, to your framing, he was using Trumpomania, Royal Rumble language. Like, I'm gonna get that ass, right? And what did 99% of the truth community do?
Good.
Get him.
They said good.
Get him.
They said, go get him. Yep.
Kill him. Arrest him. Get him. Right? Now, those same motherfuckers are going to turn around after Trump makes a deal with Petro and leaves him in power. That may or may not be the final narrative. I'm just saying, let's say that happens.
First week of February, he's coming to the White House. So
yeah. But let's just say that, you know, our framing of this is right, which you projected in advance because you have actually studied these players, which nobody who read the drops has actually studied any of these individual players or knows anything about any of these nations at all, because they didn't actually do what the drops told them to do, which was to actually research all of the geopolitics here and understand the histories and understand what's going on and what might happen in the future. So what happens is the truth community has become, as Chris would say, a cheerleading contingent that openly calls for regime change. And then when Donald Trump rug pulls that whole community and says, hey guys, we're not actually doing that. Like, obviously, I'm going after cartel elements and we're telling a story here, and Petro is going to stay in power because he's been fighting all the same people I have. All those people then say, man, you're so brilliant. Patriot psyops yet again. Without taking any responsibility for the fact that if you got your way, you would have just been responsible for an absolutely heinous and immoral act. You would have put your mandate, your sovereign will and power behind complete immorality, which sorry to filibuster, but I think that's why it's important, all the stuff you point out about the Zionist bullshit. And this all started in the wake of October 7th. That's when there was a bifurcation in the truth community, and half of the MAGA community, half of the truth community started openly calling for World War III, just not the one the globalists had in mind.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, the to that point, like, okay, so let me pull this up. This is a list from the year 2000. I'm sure many of you have probably seen this list before, okay? But the post here, I've seen this in so many formats over the years. But it says in 2000 there were 9 countries, and I just saw Skeptical in chat mention this. Appreciate the Skeptical shout out. That reminded me of this because I reposted this a while back. It says in 2000, there were 9 countries without a Rothschild-owned central bank: Iran, Iraq, Cuba, Syria, Libya, Sudan, Venezuela, Afghanistan, North Korea. Now, obviously, 4 of those countries have been scratched off. Iraq, we had a war. Libya, we overthrew Gaddafi. Sudan, there's a civil war happening right now. Venezuela is not scratched off yet, but Afghanistan, obviously. And then what's left? North Korea, Syria, Cuba, Iran. What are they talking about doing right now? What is Rick Scott talking about doing right now? Cuba's next, right? Cuba, number 3 on the list, right? So you kind of have to like take a step back. Nate Rothschild posted on January 3rd. You can go find this post. And he said, he applauded Donald Trump, said, thank God we actually did it. We overthrew Venezuela, because the Rothschilds are licking their lips right now. They're licking their chops. We're going to get our central bank now in Venezuela. Which Hugo Chavez and Nicolas Maduro have opposed this whole time. They've been in opposition to the Rothschilds. And yet all of your favorite influencers are out there saying how evil Maduro is, and how evil Hugo Chavez is, and how, you know, the Bush dynasty is shaking in their boots right now because Nicolas Maduro was overthrown. Excuse me? Maria Corina Machado was created by George Bush using USAID,
National Endowment for Democracy.
Yeah, all of that money. Like, that's how she created an NGO called Sumate in the early 2000s, and that was the NGO that was used to try to overthrow Hugo Chavez in 2004. So, like, the idea that Bush would be shaking in his boots over Maduro being overthrown, it's like he's celebrating right now. He's fist pumping, saying, "Hell yeah, let's go." Now, what he didn't expect was devolution. He didn't expect that the entire Maduro regime was going to remain in power while the big bad villain they've spent the past 20 years or 12 years building up as this horrible movie villain, he's gone now. So, like, what do? Well, you don't get your war, you don't get your regime change, you don't get, the problem is ostensibly gone, so we no longer need the conflict. This is, to your point, because you called it early on, this is the Assad template
Yeah.
Except the difference with Assad is Assad had a 14-year civil war, and then we pulled Assad. Then we extracted him. Maduro, we just extracted him before the civil war started. There was no civil war.
Yep, and this is here just to. I want to address a couple things in chat because I understand wires get crossed, especially when I get all fiery. So I do want to address a couple of good things in chat. But yeah, to your point, and I was not the only one. You were talking about this stuff. You were talking about Venezuela a lot. The one kind of thing I was adding into it. This was November. Chris and I did a show before that. Chris was talking about it in October. I've been talking about Assad December 2024 about the maneuver defense template, but then applying that to Venezuela. So this is just to show that you can see these things coming. I didn't know how the story was going to be told, but this was when Trump was escalating rhetoric against Maduro. And I said on Venezuela, Syria, and sovereign pincers, this was November of 2025, and said, yeah, I think we're going to probably see something similar play out in Venezuela to the Assad template, wherein a sovereign alliance leader is swapped out. We get some new regime leader, but there's sovereign alliance maneuver defense, so the gravity of it. To go back to that article, hold on, let me see where the hell I was. I wrote like 10,000 words over the last week on this, but this is just to put my cards on the table because we're admitting we don't know what happened here, but we're consistent about what we think happened here. This is how I summed it up. If you don't want to read 10,000 words, I believe Trump executed a fake regime change op in order to intercept the real one globalists have been planning for a decade and attempting in various stages. A point you made earlier is one I wrote in this article. Pro tip, when you find yourself cheering for the same things as characters who represent the National Endowment for Democracy, USAID, the World Economic Forum, and NATO, you might just have gotten rugged. So this was all from sovereign disentanglement, which is a concept I kind of want to talk about. That's kind of what all this is about. But a couple things in chat I want to address. First of all, Rise of Tire, happy to see you. They were talking about, I said 99% of the truth community this and 99%. I understand that's hyperbole, and I get it. It rubs people the wrong way. It happens when I get fiery. But just so we're clear, and I'm not, I don't care anymore about saying that I think Badlanders, meaning our audience, is much more attuned to fifth generation warfare than most of the truth community. So that is my framing. There are people that are going to say that's arrogant, like toward people in this audience, or on behalf of them. Fine, I don't really care. I think Badlanders are better than other truthers. I think that if you've stuck around, it's not some moral test of like you like Badlands. It's more that it's not enough for you to just pattern match. It's not enough for you to just cheer for Trump and the Patriots and Patriots in control. You believe all of those things as a prerequisite to becoming a Badlander, but the reason you're here, the reason you're in a chat like this, the reason you watch DPH or any of the rest of it, the reason you watch Go Show or engage with any of us on social media or read any of our stuff without just regurgitating all the stuff you've already believed is because you want to understand where things are going. You want to figure out where things are going. And so when I say truth community, like I know we're a part of it, but it's kind of that Venn diagram thing where I consider Badlanders in the truth community, but I think it's a concentric circle type of thing. So when I'm saying 99% of the truth community, whatever, obviously it's not that percentage, but I will say confidently that I think you guys in this audience are sometimes in a bubble talking to other Badlanders. I think that's a good bubble. I mean, I think you're having great, challenging conversations, but I don't think you understand how retarded a lot of the truth community is and how accidentally immoral they are. And all you need to do is go onto the big social media accounts of these neocons and these Zionists and these warmongers who brand themselves as MAGA and look at who's boosting them and look at their comments. Those are all truthers, right? Yeah. They're people that call themselves truthers. I'm not saying that's what you guys would describe them as. I'm saying the self-described truth community is openly cheering for like a bloody coup in Colombia because their bloodlust is up, to Ghost's earlier point. It's obviously not all, but it's a lot. It's a lot of them. And I think that's actually your first hint. I also saw a comment from Maggie Bundin there saying, we're not just saying Trump. It's more nuanced than just saying Trump is lying to us and you need to accept that. He's at a poker table. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying the reason that I'm not just excusing the morality of the psyops with Donald Trump, I approve of the psyops of Donald Trump, is because I think they got around it on a moral level. First of all, I understand it. I understand the need from it on an actual level, on a strategic level. But I also believe that I've gotten over the moral hump, and I think the Q drops were not a strategic deployment. I think they were more of a moral deployment. That's my argument. And that maybe that's not coming off well, or I'm not describing that well. But I think the choice to know is not about the strategy of letting the American people know what you're doing and knowing that you're engaging in psyops that could affect them and their families. I think it's basically extending a moral olive branch to the people who are going to engage in these things. And to Ghost's point about the PSYOP group videos as one small example, and Donald Trump speaking in the codes he does that only this community really understands or thinks they understand, is they're inviting you into the game. The choice to know is them saying, like, we are playing games here. These are war games. They're important games. We're not going to stop playing them the way that they're playing them. But I think they are inviting us in through the Q drops and saying, like, engage with these games. Engage actively. Don't sit there and cheerlead. And I just think the Colombia example is a really good one with Petro, of Trump 1 day after saying, your ass is grass, you're next, motherfucker. He's inviting him to the White House, to Ghost's point. He didn't invite Machado. She invited herself. He invited Petro to the White House, and he has completely rug pulled that narrative. So if you fell into that narrative, it's totally reasonable to have fallen into it, but then you got to retrace the steps and be like, oh, who was Trump trying to trap in these narratives? Because it wasn't you. It wasn't the truth community. It's probably these regime players that were trying to, that's my framing of it. I think that's Ghost's framing of it. I think he intercepted a real regime change operation with a quote unquote fake one. And before you take the baton from there, right before we went live tonight, minutes before we went live tonight, Donald Trump put out a Venezuelan devolution calm. Truth Social, he posts a shopped Wikipedia. I don't know if you saw this, Ghost. Trump posted acting president of Venezuela, January 2026. So he is, this to me, this is the brilliance of how Trump communicates with multiple audiences, because the bloodlust crowd gets to look at that and be like, yeah, we own Venezuela now. But the people who are engaging with it like we are, as a regime change inversion, a regime change interception, also see that as a devolution calm.
Yeah. Okay. Hold that thought, because I want to circle back and address what that thought. And you're absolutely right. I think that post is not a spike the football victory lap post. That post is a direct calm, to Chris Paul's point, to the enemy. Like, he is letting the enemy know, no, Maria Corina Machado is not the leader of Venezuela. I'm the leader of Venezuela, bitch. Mm-hmm. Like, that is what that post is. And the people like Nathaniel Rothschild who see that post are pissed right now that they are not going to get their central bank in Venezuela. By the way, you may have also saw that Pam Bondi announced that they're opening an investigation into Jerome Powell. So Jerome Powell's
now. I did not
now
see that.
Yeah, so now they're opening an investigation into Jerome Powell now. So yeah, have fun with that, Mr. Rothschild. Yeah.
Oh, by the way, that comes the day Scott Bessent does an interview and says, yes, we are going to investigate the NGO funding of, it was in response to a question on the Somali fraud in Minnesota. Bessent was asked, are you going to look into NGO funding of these, basically these protests and these organizations? And he said, absolutely. He said, we're going to use the same, he said, we've done it before, back when we took down the mafia. So like, that's some Dark Knight comms that Bessent's giving out. And then you just say, Pam Bondi says now they're investigating Jerome Powell in the Federal Reserve, right? So the day that the U.S. Treasury Secretary tells you that we're going to investigate NGO funding of domestic insurgencies, Pam Bondi at the DOJ says that we're also investigating the Federal Reserve.
Yeah. So not only are you not getting a new central bank in Venezuela, you're also going to get your Federal Reserve chairman put under investigation. And this just brings the whole Assad template full circle, because of course I think the plan was against Assad is they were going to bring ISIS back, and they were going to take all the money they were sending to Ukraine, funnel it back to Syria, pay a bunch of mercenaries to go in there and start a new war with Assad right when Trump was coming back into office. And that would have taken the whole Middle East chessboard and just flipped it over. And the Middle East gets no golden age, And if the Middle East doesn't get a golden age, we don't get a golden age either, because all like the trillions of dollars of investment that we were going to get from Saudi Arabia and Qatar was never going to come. Yeah. So here's Scott Bessent saying that imminently we are going to lift sanctions against Venezuela so that the oil companies can start extracting the oil and selling it back. That's going to help oil prices. That's going to bring oil prices down. Trump said that $100 billion, the oil companies are going to invest $100 billion. I've been following this all week. The oil companies were all saying in the Times of London and all of the globalist newspapers that they were very skeptical about going back into Venezuela. They were like, you know what? It doesn't look like we actually got rid of the Maduro regime. I don't think we want to invest money in Venezuela. And Trump said, nope, you are investing money in Venezuela. And if you go pull the list of companies that were at that meeting with Trump the other day, it's the list of companies that were targeted by the PDVSA lawsuit that was filed by Maduro in 2018 in the District of Southern Florida. So it's like that kind of fulfills my suspicion that this is damages being awarded back to Venezuela, because money that was laundered out of Venezuela by corrupt Venezuelan officials. I see Maggie in the chat asking, is Venezuela a money laundering operation? Yes and no. Money was being laundered out of Venezuela by corrupt Venezuelan officials in collusion with transnational commodity asset traders, or like oil executives. However, Maduro was the one going around arresting all those people. Like, he was the one rounding the people up in Venezuela. Now, I want to get to another comment. And look,
can I jump in on that one? Please. So keep the thought. We rabbit trail, guys. You're not.
It's Ghost of BB. You're getting around.
Yeah.
It's nothing.
Hey, we did a blitz, and we'll promote that before we get out of here tonight. Yeah. That was amazing for us. But to your point, you know what I thought of with the oil executives dinner? What does it remind you guys of? You remember another couple of dinners?
The
dinners have been the thing. August 2025. Let me remove this one real quick. Trump hosts dinner with tech giants at the White House, but Elon Musk didn't attend. Now, you know what's amazing about this is a double proof to those paying attention. So first of all, this is a hostage dinner. You got Zuckerberg there, you got Bill Gates there, you get all the usual suspects. I think Bezos was there, not positive. David Sachs, Zuckerberg. You got Google, Sundar Pichai, Mark Zuckerberg, so you got Meta, Apple, Microsoft, OpenAI, Google, more Microsoft, okay? Who wasn't there? Elon Musk. Some of us crazy kooks still believe Elon and Donald Trump are allies. We were calling the whole thing as kayfabe the entire time, actually years in advance before they even started kayfabing. That's actually why I write articles, Ghost, because then you get to refer to them and look at the timestamps. But Elon was the only one not there. And on the back of this dinner, we get, of course, the signing of all of the proposals for tech companies to invest massively into U.S. infrastructure, right? So whether you want to look at executive orders or redistribution or anything like that, either way, this was a hostage dinner, in my estimation, with Trump basically getting the tech giants in line, right? Elon's not there because Elon works with Trump. He is exempted from that group. He's not one of them. Then, so when Elon has dinners with Trump, it's just Elon and Trump. We had another dinner in November, which is more of a preview of the dinner you're talking about. White House hosts Wall Street Titans at White House dinner. JP Morgan Chase CEO, NASDAQ CEO, Blackstone CEO, BlackRock CEO, Goldman Sachs. He gets all them in line ahead of the golden age transition. And then to your point, Trump meets with oil executives at White House to push for investment in Venezuela. And as you said, and as you've been looking at, all those companies, I've been focusing more in the tech sphere and the banking sphere. All the tech companies and all the banks that Trump met with are the ones that are supercharging his golden age economic agenda. And to your point, all the oil companies he meets with are all the ones that you've theorized may have been rolled up in these regime ops. So Trump has all the leverage in the world on these players.
Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, so I want to address another comment here. And look, I like the friction. I like when people are making counterpoints, and because it stimulates conversation. I don't want people just saying, "Oh, this is all brilliant and you're super smart," whatever. Like, we don't know if we're right. We're workshopping in real time some of these ideas. But just for example, Rio Noah Farbo, Venezuela was going door to door looking for Americans. Okay, maybe Fox News told you that. Maybe Donald Trump told you that. Like, maybe that's true. But if it is true, and it probably is true to some extent, you have to realize how many failed coups have been launched against Maduro by former Green Berets specifically. And the most famous of all of them happened during Trump's first term, May 2020. It was called Operation Gideon, otherwise known as the Bay of Piglets. And the reason they call it the Bay of Piglets, the Bay of Pigs, was the 1963 failed coup against Cuba, where basically what ends up happening is JFK is left out of the room. And the reason the CIA leaves him out of the room is they say, "Sir, if you're not in the room, you get plausible deniability. You can literally go out there and tell the press you knew nothing about this and you're telling the truth. So we're going to keep you out of the room." And what ends up happening is we trained up a bunch of rebels to go into Cuba to overthrow the government. And the idea is that the U.S. Navy was going to be sitting out in the water in the Caribbean Sea, waiting for the fighting to start. And once the fighting started, we were supposed to bomb the shoreline and take out the Cuban military as they came in to take out the rebels. At the last minute, the CIA told the U.S. Navy to stand down and not fire. And so what ends up happening is all the rebels just got swept away. And the idea was it was supposed to be a black eye for JFK, because the whole thing got blamed on JFK. And from that point on, that was when JFK said, "We have to destroy the CIA. The CIA is a band of murderous traitors, and they can't be trusted." That was JFK's takeaway from that. So this is called the Bay of Piglets because it was an even dumber version of that, where basically a bunch of former Green Berets drove their boats up onto the shore in Venezuela to overthrow the Maduro government in 2020, and immediately just get grabbed and arrested. And here are the pictures of them. Okay. Maduro had their pictures taken. He immediately, the New York Times is writing about this within 48 hours. That's how much of a bungle this was. A total bungle. The guy's name who planned it was Jordan Goudreau. I think I'm saying his name right. And so I'm just going to call him Jordan because I don't know how to pronounce his last name. But Jordan.
He's French. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Exactly. And by the way, the Green Berets, that's who we use to overthrow. That's like Operation Gladio. Like you mentioned Noriega earlier. Noriega was overthrown by Green Berets, Operation Condor. So the Green Berets are the regime change unit that we use. And Matt Ehret's wife, Cynthia, has written books about that. So we've talked about it a lot on Breaking History. So Goudreau or Jordan, what ends up happening is he gets thrown in the Venezuelan prison. Maduro then later negotiates with Biden in 2023. Here's that story. And let's see right here. Biden negotiates a prisoner swap with Maduro. And so in exchange for Jordan Goudreau, the other mercenaries from that failed coup, and a few friends of Maria Corina Machado, in exchange, Maduro gets Alex Saab, who's the guy who defected to go inform on the cartels and all the corrupt.
The Dong Jingwei of Venezuela.
Exactly. Yeah. Maduro also gets the two nephews of his wife, because him and his wife married in 2014. They already had adult children at that point. And then in 2015, these two nephews of his wife get busted, and they get accused of trafficking drugs in Haiti, trying to traffic kilos of cocaine to the United States in order to fund a political campaign in Venezuela. Doesn't make any sense. But the point is that the evidence is very faulty. It's all based on the testimony of two guys. One of the guys later loses they're both like being prosecuted themselves. One of them, his immunity deal gets thrown out later because he lied so much in like throughout the whole process. And then the other guy his testimony is very unreliable. Kind of like what happened to the president of, I think it was Honduras, where Trump just pardoned him like a month ago because he was prosecuted for being a drug lord, and turns out there was no evidence at all against him. So Maduro gets those two kids back, as well as Alex Saab, in exchange for Jordan Goudreau. So what happens to Jordan Goudreau? Well, he goes on to get prosecuted by the Trump administration. He's facing prosecution right now. Here's an article. And so my theory on this situation is that because Trump has gone out and collected all of these people. He went and collected the American mercenaries who tried to overthrow the DRC government in May of 2024. He went out and collected these guys, and my guess is that these guys are all being like information is being extracted out of them, and they're like confidential and they're like informants now, basically. Here is an article from October of earlier last year, like 4 months ago, and he says that the CIA engineered the Cartel de los Soles decades ago. And after this article comes out, we now have an intelligence report from the Trump administration that confirms what he's saying right here, that the Cartel de los Soles actually was not created by Nicolas Maduro. It was actually completely fabricated by the CIA, and it has nothing to do with Nicolas Maduro. And the guys who are like allegedly a part of this Cartel de los Soles have all fled Venezuela and are now basically like facing prosecution in America unless they testify publicly against Nicolas Maduro, which they've all been doing.
Right.
And then so what happens to this guy? Well, he was supposed to show up in court on November 1st. The prosecutors, the judge let him out on bail when he gets brought back. And the prosecutors are all saying, like Trump's prosecutors who get appointed when Trump comes back, they say, hey, judge, this guy is a trained Green Beret. He has immense resources. He's a huge flight risk. We really want him back in jail before the trial. And the judge says, no, we don't think so. We're going to keep him out of jail. All right, your trial is on November 1st. We'll see you on November 1st. Well, November 1st comes and goes, and he's gone. He's in the wind. So he still is MIA. We don't know where he is. My guess is he's probably like a witness protection. That would be my guess. But the official narrative is that Trump is now prosecuting this guy and all of his friends, and he's being prosecuted under a number of laws that have to do with like trafficking weapons, trying to overthrow a foreign government, all that stuff. And so back to the point of like the comment that I called out, they were going door to door in Venezuela looking for Americans. Well, yeah, if there are a group of Americans, this is not the only group of Green Berets that have been arrested in Venezuela. There was another group that was arrested last year. And you may recall, like last night, we were talking on DPH about this article, Rick Grinnell.
Yep.
So Rick Grinnell, the reason he went to Venezuela on January 31st last year was to bring home 6 other CIA assets who tried to do a different coup at a different time, and they were arrested. And so the 6 guys that he brought back were a part of a different failed coup, not the Bay of Piglets, but a separate one. So you can understand the apprehension from the Venezuelan perspective of when you have a group of young military age guys walking around Caracas, they might be a part of a, I don't know, like former special forces unit that is there to overthrow their government. So yeah, going door to door looking for Americans, that makes a lot of sense to me. It's profiling, but it's effective.
Absolutely. I love that you brought that up, because I said I wanted to talk about a few contradictions, not in the Maduro narrative, but in the interpretation of the Maduro narrative by people who call themselves truthers. And that touches on one of them. So I've got 3 written down. One of them is tangential to that, which is, and again, I want to lay out that we're not saying you have to believe our framing of the Maduro op, but you must believe why you believe what you believe. Okay? That shouldn't be controversial. before you leave tonight, you need to understand why you think the things you do, and probably why you're wrong about it. Unless you agree with us, and then you're probably right. But one of the contradictions I wrote down here, we'll start with burden of leadership. Contradiction number 1 in people that believe the central narrative about Maduro and the Maduro regime. The reason I named it this is tangential to what you just talked about. Venezuelans go door to door. How many times have I talked about Taiwan? How many times have I talked about Ukraine? And somebody jumps in and says, well, China did this to them and Russia did this to them. And this is what happened to the Ukrainians. And this is what happened to this Ukrainian I know. This is what happened to this person in Taiwan. And my response often is, if you engage with, even if you don't agree with, sovereign alliance framing, the idea behind Russia's special military operation in Ukraine is that they are claiming globalist Nazis and special forces are operating in, meaning occupy, that territory, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if bad things are happening to the people in that territory, who's doing it? Now, easier framing in this situation would be, look at the United States. The reason I named the contradiction burden of leadership, you're talking about people on the ground, but essentially the guys going door to door are automatically conflated and assigned to Maduro, right? Why? Because Maduro is in charge. Maduro is the leader. But Maduro, this is what's funny. By the machine's own admission, for the last 10 years, Nicolas Maduro is the subject and the target of ongoing color revolutions. They are not, guys, this isn't one of those like we're just claiming that there's a color revolution against Nicolas Maduro. They have been promoting the color revolution against Nicolas Maduro. They have been campaigning against Nicolas Maduro, not in politics, but with regime change coding, regime change message, not even coding. They've been saying it openly. And when I say they, I'm not talking about the Trump administration. I'm talking about the National Endowment for Democracy, George Soros, USAID.
Barack Obama, the first president to issue sanctions against Venezuela in 2014. Barack Obama.
So, burden of leadership, right? Anything that happens in Venezuela is the responsibility of the Maduro regime. Despite the fact that not a single person in the truth community would apply that framing to the United States. Nobody watching this show right now, most likely, would say that Donald Trump is responsible for the color revolution tactics that are right now on January 11th happening in Minneapolis, Minnesota, in a major United States city. I don't even have to go to J6. I don't have to go to anything in the past. Right now in the streets, probably most of you watching this show have been talking for a week or more about the color revolution being being deployed against the American people, and by extension, the current leader of the American people, the commander-in-chief, the president of the United States, is the subject and the target of a color revolution. That is, and there's been plenty of others. They're threatening impeachment again, right? But we don't even have to go to any of that. So is Donald Trump responsible for the events that are transpiring in Minneapolis right now? Obviously not. Now, it's possible that Maduro was the guy sending these soldiers door to door and is the evil bad dictator man that you might believe he is. But the reason he is that is not because you have been told that his soldiers are going door to door. This is the same crap where any retarded liberal or normie you know, how many things have they attributed to Donald Trump that you have evidence was not Donald Trump's doing, but it doesn't matter to them because he is the leader. Anything MAGA coded that occurs must be Donald Trump's doing. He must be endorsing it. And anything not MAGA coded, but that visits negative effects upon the country, Donald Trump is in charge. Donald Trump is responsible. It's very silly framing, but it's framing that nobody in this audience, most of the people in this audience understand sovereign alliance framing. None of you would apply that to Vladimir Putin or any of the color revolutions run against him. An increasing number of you, although still a disturbingly high number of truth community people, think that like China bad, even though they think that Xi and Putin are working with Trump to destabilize the globalist order. Doesn't make a lot of sense here, but somehow when we go 3 hops to South America, everybody believes that whoever is publicly in charge of these nations, despite being the subject of color revolutions, by NGOs, are definitely the people that the NGOs tell you they are.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, contradictions. I just mentioned that the first person to enact, the first president to put sanctions on Venezuela, not Maduro specifically, that was Trump who did that, but just other officials in Venezuela, was Barack Obama in 2014. He was very anti-Venezuela, very much so. He kind of
anti-Russia.
Yeah, he kind of started that whole narrative op, even more so than Bush in a lot of cases. I mean, Bush was very anti-Hugo Chavez, but so was Barack Obama. You have to ask yourself, wait a minute, isn't Venezuela like a socialist country? And they are. I mean, they like you go listen to Maduro's speeches. He does talk about socialism. Like, they are far more openly socialist when it comes to fiscal policies than we are. A lot of that has to do, by the way, with being anti-imperialist and transnationalist corporation. They don't want transnational bankers coming in and buying up all their stuff. That's what Rand Paul says is a true free market. BlackRock should be allowed to come and buy your house out from underneath you, according to Rand Paul, because that is a free market. That's free market economics, according to Rand Paul. Literally, that's what he says, is that you shouldn't have any restrictions. If BlackRock wants to come leverage their resources to steal your house from you, they should be allowed to do that. However, Venezuela is also the most socially conservative country in the Western Hemisphere. Maria Corina Machado promised to reverse all that. Right now, it is illegal to get an abortion in Venezuela unless the mother's life is at risk. Even in the case of rape, you're not allowed to get an abortion because they're that hardcore Catholic. You are not allowed to get an abortion unless the mother is going to die, which is very, very rare. Gay marriage, completely outlawed. You will go to prison for being married if you're gay in Venezuela. Now, you can get mad about that, but look at the effect that it's had on Western civilization doing that. Maria Corina Machado said, I'm going to legalize gay marriage. I'm going to legalize abortion. I'm going to legalize the education, the LGBTQ tolerance. I'm going to bring
agenda.
I'm going to bring Globo Homo to Venezuela. And the truth movement is celebrating that as something that is good. Like, that is a good thing. Wait a minute. Charlie Kirk and Ben Shapiro and the Daily Weimar have been telling me for the past 5 years that is bad, that when a civilization embraces LGBTQ, that's when guys, like little boys, start getting their penises cut off, and people are confused about who has the hoo-haws and who has the wee-wees. That's a bad thing, right? But yet we are celebrating that Maria Corina Machado and her globalist friends are going to bring this to Venezuela. Like, never mind the socialist policies of their fiscal policies. Their conservative social policies they're against all that crap. And they make fun of us. Maduro makes fun of us for allowing that in our country, like for allowing us to castrate our sons. He's like, why are you castrating your sons? Like, that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. But there you are. Kim Jong-un also laughs about it. Putin also laughs about it. Like, why are you doing castrating your sons? But we do it, and it's totally legal.
Yep. And yeah, all of these things is it really just shows. I mean, I think you were the one who used the word first on the show tonight, but bloodlust. There is a bloodlust to a lot of people that I have been saying for years. I'm a broken record. You guys all know I've been saying this, that there's a lot of people. Yeah, she got the Nobel. She got the Nobel
because of that, yeah.
Yeah. How often do I use the term reverse indicator for anybody who watches this show or reads anything? The ultimate reverse, and I cannot think of a bigger reverse indicator or a reverse signal than being a Nobel laureate. Yep. Winning a Nobel Peace Prize is an inversion. Chris Paul would say total inversion within the false reality. If the regime, the globalist regime, the deep state, gives you their top award for peacekeeping efforts. And if you know that that apparatus is responsible for the perpetuation and the seeding and the cultivation and fomenting of war worldwide, they are giving her the Nobel Peace Prize because she was going to start the next great war down there. She was going to start a civil war, as you said early in the show. That's what that's all about. Now, I think Trump and Patriots obviously knew about this. I even think the FIFA award was like, you know, you mentioned earlier in the show, these kind of comms from Patriots and the taunts. I think there are taunts going back and forth. And yeah, that's why early on in this audience got it, and we were talking about it on the shows. The biggest and brightest counter signal that was put out by Trump that I think encoded onto choice to know will be yours, choice to know, maybe if not what is going on, then definitely what is not going on with the Maduro op, was him very directly not endorsing Machado for that position. And what you and I said when he did that was Donald Trump rug pulled a regime change op here. And what I wrote my whole article about, and I was posting about this and writing about it in the Badlands brief earlier last week, I just expanded it over the weekend, was essentially the idea that from a narrative perspective, on the back of the regime change op by Donald Trump, you know, swapping Maduro out, the machine, the globalist machine and Machado as their character, was going to have a hell of a hard time drumming up support for regime change when they just got the regime change that they've been drumming up support for 10 years. So what they really are in a position now of doing is trying to convince everybody of what we're trying to convince you. But they can't say that part. So we're trying to say there was no regime change. The Maduro regime remains in power in Venezuela. The globalist machine knows that that is true. But if they say that, they have to admit that Trump's regime change of Maduro was fake. Which means they have to say that Trump and Maduro are working with each other. And they can't say that because they know that the truth sounds utterly insane, not just to their own constituents, but to a lot of the MAGA community. Nobody believes that, essentially outside of Badlanders, and even a lot of them are challenging us on it. So it gives you some more indications of why was there a need, or why did Trump feel there was a need to tell the story in this way. He didn't just rug pull the actual regime change op. He took the story they were telling and finished it with a different ending. He wrote a different ending on the back of the story that they wrote.
And just to kind of demonstrate the signals that we like examine and we look at, you know, the article that I was showing you before, this one, Machado can't hand Peace Prize to Trump. The Nobel organizers are like, you can't do that. You can't transfer it to them. Like we gave it to you. And the reason they said that was because Sean Hannity tried to do damage control, because obviously the optics of her getting the Nobel Peace Prize, given everything Trump's done over this past year, were really bad. And so it made her look really bad. It wasn't just making the Nobel people look bad. It made her look bad. And so look at what Sean Hannity did last week.
Right. Did you at any point offer to give him the Nobel Peace Prize? Did that actually happen? I had read that somewhere. I wasn't sure if it was true.
Well, it hasn't happened yet, but I certainly love to be able to personally tell him that we believe the Venezuelan people, because this is a prize of the Venezuelan people, certainly want to give it to him and share it with him. What he has done, as I said, is historic. It's a huge step towards a democratic transition, and I want to.
And so I think Hannity, Hannity then went and interviewed Trump like a few days later, and he said to Trump, he was like, Maria Corina Machado told me she wanted to give you the Nobel Peace Prize. Will you accept? And Trump was like, I mean, Trump was kind of like, nah, I don't want it. And he was like, well, she wants to come to the White House. Is she going to come to the White House? And he was like, yeah, I heard she's going to be in town. Like, I heard she's going to be in town. We're going to be busy, but, you know, we'll leave the back door open if she wants to come by and, like, have a drink and maybe take a tour. But we're busy. Like, we got shit to do. So, you know, like, don't make yourself too comfortable, but you can come in and, you know, have a drink, like, get a tour. Like, we'll give you some tchotchkes. Like, we'll give you some tchotchkes, but you know, we're busy. Because they're trying to present it as like a meeting of the leaders, like Maria Corina Machado and Trump are going to meet, and Trump's like, like if I have time, I'll you know, pour her a drink.
And the key point there, or one key point that I don't want to be lost in what Ghost just said: who is trying to present Maria Corina Machado as the opposition leader? Fox News. Fox News. And for anybody that wonders, like, oh, well, if you don't trust all the Fox News guys, why does Trump go on their show? Because he knows that the Fox audience does. He goes where the people are. This isn't rocket science. Like, Donald Trump goes where the people are. He goes where there's an audience, and he knows that the Fox audience is his audience. Not all of them, but most of them are his audience. So I'm not telling you Sean Hannity is evil or bad or whatever. I am telling you he probably doesn't know what the fuck is going on. And that's what I think about a lot of these guys, even the ones who are quote unquote good. And here's that clip just to demonstrate how Trump kind of navigates this.
Thank you for getting.
Let me ask you about Maria Corina Machado. I've had her on TV this week.
Yeah, she's a very nice person.
Okay, she won the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yes.
When she accepted that Peace Prize, she dedicated it to you. She said to me this week, both on TV and radio, that she wants to give the Nobel Prize, her Nobel Peace Prize, to you for liberating her country. In 2023, she won over 92% of the vote to be the leader of the opposition. Maduro kept her off the ballot. Do you have any plans to meet with her? And
so, you know, I know this audience understands this, but you know, if you're wondering why some people don't necessarily trust these guys, Hannity leads that segment, and I do mean leads in a journalistic sense. He leads that segment in the exact same framing as if Donald Trump was sitting down with 60 Minutes.
Yep.
He tells the audience, that's what the leading is for. I know most of you guys understand this. The leading into the question is not for Donald Trump. Trump knows how to weave in and out of this. Even idiots in the media have understood, I think, that Trump is not going to fall into the lead. The lead's not for Trump. The lead is for the audience.
Yep.
So he has patterned the audience with Maria Corina Machado is the rightful leader of Venezuela. She got 92% of the vote. She's a Nobel Peace Prize winner. And I've interviewed her on the show, and now she wants to be friends with you. Like, Hannity's framing is not this bitch.
Yeah.
His framing is the rightful hero of Venezuela wants to come here, and we can see how Trump navigates it.
Well, and look how he presented it. He presented it as if she offered to give him the Peace Prize. He asked her, he said, hey, I read online somewhere that you're going to give him the Nobel Peace Prize. Are you going to do that? Are you going to follow up on it? It was a softball. He was throwing a meatball right down the middle of the plate for her to hit out of the park. And she was like, yes, I would love to. Oh, yes. Oh, me gusta. Yes, yes. It's like, and then he turns around and says, well, she told me she's going to give you the Nobel Peace Prize. Are you going to meet with her? And it's like, what is Trump supposed to say there? If he like, no, I'm not going to meet with her. I don't have time to meet with this wannabe social media influencer. Yeah, he's gonna be like, yeah, I mean, okay, she's a nice person. If she wants to come by the White House, we'll give her a hat, we'll give her a bag. Like, yeah, I mean, okay,
we'll give her the photo.
Like, well, yeah, we'll give her a Disney World shirt. You know, it's like, yeah, okay, sweet. But you know, the whole thing is framed, and then of course Fox News is going to turn around and they probably wrote a headline: Maria Corina Machado and Trump going to share the Nobel Peace Prize. This is how they make the news. This is how they build the fake reality. Yep. That whole thing was just facilitated by Sean Hannity. He just made that whole thing up and then presented it to Trump as if she like was coming out of the woodwork offering the Nobel Peace Prize to him. And now the Nobel community is saying, you can't do that. You can't do that. We already engraved the trophy. The trophy already has your name on it. You can't give it to Trump now. It's just so stupid. But this is how, you know, again, the truth movement is like cheering for all this crap. Like they're like acting like this woman is, I mean, up until 2 weeks ago, when Trump was like, I guess 10 days ago, what was it, 8 days ago, when Trump said, no, we're not going to install her. The truth movement was convinced that she was like the second coming. Like she was going to be the leader. Like she was going to be the great liberator. This National Endowment for Democracy shill was going to be the great liberator of Venezuela. And then Trump was like, yeah, actually nobody in Venezuela really knows who she is or respects her. So I don't think she's going to be the leader.
We're already seeing the rebrands though, Ghost. We're used to this, but you know, we decided to jump on the grenade while it was happening. We weren't the only ones, but basically Badlands were the only ones who jumped on that grenade day one and said, yeah, this looks kind of like, you know, Venezuelan devolution. This looks like a counter-regime change up. At the very least, this Maria Corina Machado bitch can get fucked. And I will confidently say that we were the only ones saying that. And not only that, but many of the influencers, we're talking about like these people that have shows and podcasts or whatever like ours, they came out fire and brimstone, bag them and tag them, get the next one, get the one after that, while promoting Maria Corina Machado. And now some of them, the smarter ones, are being like, shit, we are promoting a National Endowment for Democracy, USAID, Nobel Peace Prize, globalist whore. And we need to somehow rebrand while pretending that we weren't just endorsing this, because we're going to pretend that we knew Donald Trump was rug pulling her and the globalists the whole time, which is what these people do. But let's continue with let's see how Trump weaves out of this. And by the way, I think the reason it's important to look at what Hannity did there, to Ghost's point, is the premise is the most important part of a narrative to look at. You know, you want to project where it goes, you want to follow the details, you want to understand the nuances and all that. Fine, that's all useful stuff. The most important thing, from my perspective, to attempt to understand narrative intent is to examine the premise that is laid out before the story is told. And Sean Hannity's premise for the question is Machado good, Maduro bad. So it's important.
Would you accept the Nobel Prize she wants to hand to you?
Well, I understand she's coming in next week sometime. And I look forward to saying hello to her. And I've heard that she wants to do that. That would be a great honor. I did put out 8 wars, 8 and a quarter, because, you know, Thailand and Cambodia started going at it again. So
I'll put the list up
I give
if
a
you
quarter,
want.
so it's you put the list out. It's a hell of a list. But I've stopped 8 wars. And I think, it's been a major embarrassment to Norway. Now, I don't know what Norway has to do with it, but that's where the committee is located, a lot of Norwegian people. And it's been a very big embarrassment to the country of Norway, whether they have anything to do with it or not. I think they do. They say they don't. But, when you put out 8 wars, in theory, you should get one for each war, okay? Because some of these wars were going on for 30 years. India, Pakistan was ready to go at it big, and these are 2 nuclear.
I need to re-listen to that little part, because that's I have not seen this clip, and that is perfect.
Say they don't. But, when you put out 8 wars, in theory, you should get one for each war, okay? Because some of these wars were going on for 30 years. India, Pakistan was ready to go at it big, and these are 2 nuclear countries. I got that one stopped. 8 planes were shot down. They were really at it, and I got it stopped. It was a big one. You look at the Congo, Rwanda and the Congo. They've been fighting for 30 years, and I got it stopped. I got so many wars, so it's such a beautiful thing.
So, one little note on that, and then I want your takeaway. But one of the things I said in the long form I wrote is again that the Nobel Peace Prize is not just a reverse indicator of globalists, but it's an inversion. If you get a Nobel Peace Prize, you probably helped the regime forward the polar opposite. People in this audience are very familiar with satanic framing and satanic inversion, and I absolutely believe that goes on as well. I think the Nobel Peace Prize is a humiliation ritual on us. It's a humiliation ritual on the people. The same way the Obama administration, the Bush administration, many of them, but I would say especially the Obama administration, used the Presidential Medal of Freedom as a humiliation ritual. They gave it to all the worst people in our country. So the reason I keyed in on that little section there is Trump said, they say you should get it for every war. He doesn't say you should get it for every war you stop, right? Shouldn't the Nobel Peace Prize be for stopping wars?
That's funny. Yeah.
Was that a Freudian slip, or was that Donald Trump being the master of narrative warfare that he is and saying, they say you should get a Nobel Prize for every war? So people, this is the brilliance of Trump, is people get to take out of his words whatever they see. And people are just going to assume, yeah, he's saying I stopped 8 wars, I should get 8 Nobel Prizes. I think he's also telling you they don't give them to the people that stop the wars. They give them to the people that start the wars. And they just gave it to Machado a little too quick, which probably tells you, that might tell you something about the timing, right? I mean, the timing of this whole operation is that she gets the Nobel Prize. Was that a little bit of an indicator that that civil war that you mentioned earlier in the show, they were ready. They were getting ready there. And that might have been why we saw the timing on this rug pull.
Yeah, and remember when it was announced? It was announced, I think, back, if I remember correctly, back in September during the UN General Assembly when they were convening in New York City. And what was happening in the background there was that, first of all, Gustavo Petro had his diplomats, we learned later, in Qatar. This would have been September 19th, meeting with the Gulf Clan, which is the largest cocaine cartel operating in Colombia today, negotiating their surrender, because he's been bombing them for the past 3 years and arresting all their leaders. And now they're finally basically crying uncle and agreeing to give up all their weapons and surrender and stop their operations. Gustavo Petro, this is how I first stumbled onto him, was I was just listening to like UN speeches in the background while I was doing stuff, because I was tracking the UN, because that was when the 2-state solution in Israel was at its peak. The Colombian president gets up and he starts speaking, and I'm like, all right, I'm just listening to him. And he says, if you're going to war with the cartels, are you going to war with DC? Because they're all on the cartel's payroll. And I was like, holy shit, this guy's based. And then I started looking into him, and that's when I realized that this was all happening. Maduro then turns around and gives a speech. I have this clip, but we won't need to watch it. Not a speech. He gives an interview like right after that, where he says, 85% of the cartel's money is laundered through major U.S. banks. They're part of the cartel too. Like, I mean, you don't hear...
In my year-end feature, I wrote in a section on the cartels, I always put banking in parentheses.
Yeah. And by the way, like those kind of like little clips from Maduro are all over the place over the years.
Yep.
I mean, him and Assad were talking about how JFK was killed by the CIA, how JFK was like super based and awesome, and that's why he was killed. And the counterpoint to that is, well, that's just lip service. Like talk is cheap. It's like, yeah, talk is cheap. So where are all the U.S. politicians saying that? Where are all the U.S. politicians coming out and scoring those easy points by calling this stuff out? None of them would even think about saying something like that.
Because they're all on the take.
Because they're all on the take, exactly. Now, what's really interesting is that when this was announced, Machado, getting the Nobel Peace Prize, the narrative around the White House was that the White House was furious, that they were fucking pissed. They're like, this is bullshit. We have solved so many conflicts. Why is this dumb Latina getting this award? Like, what has she done? She's done nothing. And who was it who nominated Maria Corina Machado? This is a letter dated August 26, 2024, from the Congress of the United States to the Norwegian Nobel Committee. And it is signed by who? Marco Rubio.
Wow.
So
and
Marco
he's
Rubio,
smack dab in the middle of this.
Yeah,
narrative.
Marco Rubio and Rick Scott are the ones who, among others, are the ones who nominated her for the Nobel Peace Prize. And this is August of 24. So this is way before. And Marco Rubio, of all the people that Trump appointed to his cabinet, he was like the dark horse. Like, he was like, what? Like Marco Rubio? So like nobody saw Marco Rubio coming as far as being part. Like, that was a total curveball. This kind of gives it a little bit of context. Like, he's the one who nominated her for the Peace Prize, that now everyone's made such a big deal of and pointed to as like, well, obviously she's a regime shill. She got the Nobel Peace Prize instead of Trump.
Absolutely. And yeah, you wonder what's going on with guys like Rubio, or you're like, hey, is Marco really a super based, ultra white hat, silent running forever, even though everybody that talks about that now thought he was an absolute stooge a few years ago? Or is he being humiliated in front of the cameras, just like everybody else attached to the global regime? And, you know, to further the Nobel Prize point, and Rubio and the rest of it, I think a lot of what's going on here is a reverse humiliation ritual. I often talk about the reverse Hegelian dialectic that I think the Patriots are using. And I think they're saying, no, Marco. Like, he was probably going to be in the State Department in an Elseworld uniparty regime, right? And I think what they're doing, the Patriots and Donald Trump, I think they are running the enemy playbook on a narrative level.
Perfect transition. Yep.
And rug pulling it on an actual level. So they're burning out. This is what Chris Paul calls drafting. They're burning out these narratives essentially, but there's no actuals on the end of them. So we got the narrative translation of Venezuelan regime change. But as I wrote in my long form this weekend, if you picture an Elseworld scenario, an Elseworld 2025 where Kamala Harris is president, Maria Corina Machado gets her regime change, there's a civil war in Venezuela, U.S. State Department gets involved, they manage the transition, there's blood in the streets, regime is in control, regime meaning globalist regime is in control of Venezuela. All of the plot points that we've essentially seen over the last 7 days would roughly have happened in the way we're being told. But on the end of them, we would have had a bloody civil war in Venezuela. Instead, we get the narrative mirror of that without any of the pain. And now we already have things like this. U.S. and Venezuela explore restoring diplomatic ties after Maduro's capture.
Yep.
Delcy Rodriguez, second in command of Maduro, longtime ally of Maduro, not a newbie, not a Johnny-come-lately. I know that this is what's funny, is I know a lot of the neocon sphere, they don't understand what's happening. So the only way that they can deal with the cognitive dissonance in their heads of Trump working with Rodriguez is one of two things. She bent the knee to Trump because otherwise he was going to carpet bomb Venezuela because they think Trump is going to carpet bomb every country. Or Rodriguez is the one who set up. She betrayed Maduro.
Yeah.
She betrayed Maduro, but kept all of his generals in place.
That one. I've seen people saying that. Like, she betrayed Maduro, even though she's been out there saying Maduro is the only true president.
Yeah.
And I'm only keeping the seat warm. He's still the president of Venezuela. I'm just, like, basically the puppet, like, sitting on the throne for him.
And that's cognitive dissonance. And to finish that point on the narrative mirroring idea, speaking of Nobel Peace Prizes, Tattoo Teacher mentioned this in the chat. She's absolutely right. Look who received a big one, and look at when he received it. Barack Obama, Nobel Peace Prize.
What year was
he
that?
received it? 2009. 2009. Following this,
before
I
he
looked up.
Accomplished anything, right?
Well, not only did he not accomplish anything, in the 8 years that followed the winning of the Nobel Prize, Barack Obama significantly expanded or began conflicts in the following regions. Wars Obama inherited and expanded. 2, Iraq and Afghanistan. Many in this community are aware of that. He's the first one that authorized drone strikes on civilians, all the rest of it, right? New or expanded conflicts under Obama. Now, think of some of the names here and what Ghost in particular talks about on his show all the time and what we've talked about a little bit tonight. Pakistan, Somalia, Yemen, Libya, and Syria. So we were not involved in military action in any of those 5 spots before Obama. And after he received a Nobel Peace Prize, he got us involved in those 5 different hotspots. where we've seen regime changes and all democracy making efforts around the world. So just to finish that point, it looks like the Nobel Prize is something you get before you then start the wars.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And it's worth noting Libya was the first time that NATO, like the first official time. I mean, NATO may have been there secretly before that. This would have been 2011. Right. The first time NATO officially, openly engaged in operations on the continent of Africa. And the entire premise for them going into Libya was in Al Jazeera, which is MI6. That's Muslim Brotherhood MI6. That's Al Jazeera, based in London. Al Jazeera reported that Gaddafi was giving his soldiers Viagra and telling them to rape women in the villages around Libya where ISIS where ISIS was operating. And that was later proven to be completely fabricated. Like later they did an investigation into like that story, and they found that the whole story was completely made up. And yet the generals in NATO held that article up and said, we have to go in now. They're raping women. We have to go in. And that was the whole reason NATO went into Libya. And they murdered Gaddafi. And then literally the slave markets came back to Tripoli, and they were literally just trading, like slave trading out in the open. ISIS was, after they overthrew Gaddafi. And the neocons celebrated and said, what a great thing we just did here.
Yeah, the infamous clip, we saw, he died, Hillary Clinton. That's maybe her most infamous clip to this audience. And who else does that remind you of? Who else does that, what other scenario does the Gaddafi one remind you of? Assad. What was the story? What was the major story that was later admitted? I think the admitted word is important because, like you said, it's not just that we found out it was fabricated. It's the people that told us the stories later admitted that it was fabricated.
Yep.
And so that's with Gaddafi. With Assad, he was gassing his people, right? That's why the white helmets got involved. Bashar al-Assad was gassing the Syrian people. Turns out, no, he wasn't. Didn't happen. Sorry about that. Whoops.
Yep. Turns out the gas that they accused him of making is only made in labs that are controlled by the CIA. That was Seymour Hersh is the one who reported on that in 2016. Is that, turns out that this gas is a special kind of sarin gas that is only found in labs that were made by the CIA, and it's very, very difficult to synthesize and reproduce. So it must, like, obviously it was Obama who gave the weapons to ISIS, and then ISIS planted the weapons, and then the weapons were set off, and then it was blamed on Assad. What did Assad and Gaddafi both have in common? Well, they were both part of the original Sovereign Alliance from 20 years ago. The problem with that Sovereign Alliance is that they had no real power projection. They didn't have Putin yet. Putin wasn't part of it yet. And they didn't have any actual military strength to stand up to the regime. Now they do. Now they have China, Russia, and Iran, and they actually have real power projection. But back then, they didn't have that. And that's why Saddam, Assad, Gaddafi, all of them got overthrown.
I want to actually dig a little deeper into that because I think it's an important rabbit trail. I totally agree with you that they didn't have, the original Sovereign Alliance did not have the power projection. But one of the things I write about a lot, and part of the reason that I think that, all of John's devolution research on Donald Trump is so paramount to understanding the Sovereign Alliance. One of the things I've forwarded, one of the theories I've forwarded since 2022 is that the reason Vladimir Putin got the green light from a Sovereign Alliance perspective to go into the Donbass and deal with the regime is because of Trump's devolution operation. I would argue that as much as the U.S. devolution operation forwarded and accelerated the awakening and the info war in the United States, and I do think it did, we've talked about that a lot at Badlands, I don't think that was the primary reason for U.S. devolution. I think the primary reason was to take Trump off the board from an optics perspective so that the power projection you're talking about that was missing from the Sovereign Alliance could be forwarded and could be projected. And it's not just that they didn't have Russia at that time. I sort of think they did. I think that the Russians and Putin could not get involved because who did NATO have at their beck and call? The United States military. And first of all, the Russians can't beat the United States military. Second of all, they don't want to fight the US military because they know that the leaders of the US military, I should say at that time, they knew that the Obama administration was trying to trigger conflict between the US military and them, which is why I've given my anecdotes in the past about a series of sovereign alliance pincers between the US and Russia that were taking place mostly in Syria in 2018 were being done without the conscious knowledge of the Russians and the American soldiers. They knew that they were not supposed to fight each other, but it wasn't being translated to them like, this is a pincer movement between you two. It's just like, hey, avoid this Russian airspace. Hey, avoid this American airspace. You're both going after these targets. Turns out that those targets were all ISIS targets and that the Americans and the Russians were both going after them. It wasn't until the Trump era that Putin could engage. And, one of the reasons I've long respected Putin, especially with the benefit of hindsight, is I think he showed necessary and tremendous restraint during that era, the Obama era, because he was being prodded and his military was engaging ISIS forces, and he was trying to support by proxy these sovereign leaders in the Middle East, including Assad and Gaddafi, and they obviously lost out on the Gaddafi theater, but I think it's because Putin knew that Obama wanted him to commit. And to finish this point, part of, I think, why Obama went so hard into Syria and Libya was to try to draw Putin out. They knew that they couldn't go into Russia because, the American people, even liberals, would have been like, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah.
But we were already in the Middle East and Assad was gassing his own people, right? So we had to go there. If conflict happened between Russians and Americans in that theater, Obama gets his war.
Yeah, well, and to that point, you're right that Assad and Putin were allies back then. Syria, going back to the Cold War, host those two Russian bases, the Navy base and the air base on the coast of Syria. Very, very strategic, important Russian military installations because they don't have, now they've signed an agreement to build one in Sudan, but before that they don't have any bases in Africa. So they launch all their Africa operations out of Syria. The difference was that during Putin's first term, and I've learned this from doing the Book of Trump, is that he was trying to make nice with the West. He was trying to bury the hatchet and restore relations between Russia and the West. And the first conflict he had to deal with as prime minister in 1999 was Yugoslavia. And I've had private conversations with Colonel Oak, who was deployed to Kosovo. By the way, that's one of those conflicts that Trump talks about now, Serbia, Kosovo.
Yeah, forever conflicts.
Yeah, and he told me, and I, Oak, if you're listening, we should do a Kosovo 99 Book of Trump episode where he comes on and explains this. But he was saying,
Oak's listening. Oak is always among us.
Well, we were like, he was showing me, we were looking at the maps. This is just him and I talking privately, but because I contacted him and said, I have questions about this. There are like different regions of Kosovo. There were like different, it's like, okay, the Germans are here, the British are here, the Americans are here, the Russians are here. And he said that every other American commander there, and even all the NATO commanders, from all the other European countries, wanted nothing to do with Russia. But he made a point to reach out to the Russians, and he actually ended up becoming friends with them, talking to them like every day. He'd have lunch with their commander every week. And then he actually started working with them and coordinating with them and found that they were actually very, very helpful. The Russians were there to protect the Serbs, and the Americans were there to protect the Albanians, the people of Kosovo. And he said the U.S. military told him that the Serbs were the bad guys and the Albanians were the good guys. And they were like, you got to watch out for those Serbs because them and the Russians, they're going to come after you. But actually, once they got boots on the ground, what he found and him and his men found it was the opposite. The Albanians, who were the Muslims, and the Serbs were the Christians, were going out in the middle of the night and burning churches down and raping old women. He said there was this old woman that his soldiers became very good friends with, and then they found her one day dead, and she had been raped by these Albanians, and his guys were like ready just to go ape shit on these guys. But he said the Albanians that he had to deal with, that he was forced to deal with, were absolute scum of the earth. But those are the guys that NATO was like, these are the good guys. These are the guys that we're partners with. But the Russians,
same story in the Donbass with the Ukrainian Nazis.
Yeah, but I hope I'm not talking out of school here. I don't think I am, but yeah, I mean, it's just really interesting insight given like all the stuff that we've talked about in these other conflicts. And there's even a clip of Putin talking about Yugoslavia that we should play, where he talks about how there is no international law and it's just might makes right, like, you know, and whatever, the strong do it, the strong will. But it wasn't until the color revolution in Ukraine in 2004, the Orange Revolution, which started the whole thing that led to the Maidan coup, and then really Georgia, which you came on the Book of Trump and talked about that one, the Chechen, like,
and that's coming back.
Yeah, it's like the Chechen wars and then like the Georgian war. That's really what's changed everything in 2008. Once NATO went into Georgia and they tried to start a war with Russia, that was when Putin was like, okay, we're done. Like, that's it. He comes back in 2012 and he's like, he actually gave his public reason. The reason I'm going to run for president again is because Hillary Clinton said they're going to establish a no-fly zone in Syria, and we cannot allow that to happen. And that was the official reason he said, I'm running for president again.
I've said before, I think might have been on your show, that the reason, before I was a MAGA person or anything like that, the reason I totally doomed out on Clinton was that no-fly zone. Because I was training with Russians at the time, and I was like, man, she looks an awful lot like she's either really, really stupid and careless, or like she is attempting to make sure that the provocations Obama is forwarding against Putin are finalized when she comes in. And, you know, I had turned fully on Obama by 2012. But it was by 2011, really. But by that election in 2012, I didn't vote. But that's when I started souring on Clinton, because they were starting to drum up, you know, her eventual run. And she was basically running on a de facto, we're going to take Putin out campaign. Obama was a lot more subtle about it. You know, it's why I always give props to Obama. He was a great villain. Like, he's very skilled, very talented. He's the best Manchurian candidate they ever had. Very good communicator, always said the right thing. And when I say that, I'm not saying he was polite or whatever. I mean, from a statecraft, a deep statecraft perspective, he said the right things. He wasn't actually escalatory in his rhetoric, even though the actuals he was forwarding were escalatory actuals. His rhetoric remained gilded in a peaceful veneer, even toward Putin. He would try to be polite with Putin on the public stage, on the world stage. But meanwhile, behind the scenes, the Russians are like, he's arming a color revolution against our guys and our people in the Donbass. And Obama's like, no, this is a misunderstanding. You know, this is clearly the people spoke. They had this election. And, you know, we need to just rug pull the whole thing. But Hillary Clinton would get on TV and be like, you know what we need to do when I get in there? Fuck them Ruskies. Yeah. And you can, you know, you imagine that the kind of the boys in the back, the deep state boys in the back in Brussels are like, Hillary, chill dog, Hill dog. Like, you gotta relax. I know we're gonna kill the Ruskies, but you gotta keep that shit under wraps. Like, first of all, they're too white to drum up that much hatred against them this quickly in the American populace. Like, you want to say the shit about Gaddafi? Fine. Liberals don't care. Conservatives love it. But you start going against them boys in Russia, and Americans don't really want.
She was trying to tap into the bloodlust. She was trying to tap into the neoconservative bloodlust.
Too quick.
And she thought that, you know, that was the calculus, is that she thought she could win the center right with, you know, like regime change wars and going to war with Russia. And that was probably the calculus. And remember, like, as I said before, $2 trillion put together to take out Assad. The only reason Assad wasn't taken out was because of Hezbollah. Hezbollah came over from Lebanon and protected him from ISIS. And then after a couple years, when Hillary said the no-fly zone, that's when Putin said, "Fuck it, we're going in." The Russians came in, and who did Putin send in? He sent in the Kadyrovsky. He sent in the Chechens to Syria to protect Assad. And then what did we get last week we got what did I just do to it? This one. We got Zelensky asking the U.S. to kidnap the Chechen leader, to kidnap Ramzan Kadyrov. It's like
the globalists are watching our shows and being like, "We got to take that guy out. He sounds like he's got a really good ground game."
Like you can't make this shit up. It's like this is A+ writing right here. A+.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course Kadyrov's response is, "Hey pussy, why don't you come do it yourself? Like why are you asking Trump to do it? Why don't you and your boys, your thugs from Kiev, why don't you come over here and take me out?" I love it.
I think the reason, if there's a reason that patriots do get annoyed with us, it's because it's not that they think we're like bad or evil or anything, or that we're actually going to mess up in this, like, I mean, the larger community, that we're going to mess up operations. It's that we're like how Disney doesn't like leakers, right? They're like, you motherfuckers, like, you already told everybody that Tobey Maguire was in the next Spider-Man movie, and now the whole reveal in the movie is ruined. And I think that's why they get a little annoyed sometimes, because they're just like, God damn it! I've been working on the whoever the writer is in the writers' room that was like working on the Chechen C plot. They're like, I've been working on this plot line, and you fucks go on the Book of Trump, and you're just like, watch for the Chechens because they're gonna come back into this, and and we're also calling them out on the Maduro one. We're like, this is a beat for beat. I mean, it's great writing, but it is beat for beat the Assad template. Like, you guys are recycling plot threads that you used last season. Like, last season just ended. So, I understand. There's only so many ways to pull a rug. So you got to do what you got to do. But we're going to call you out. We're going to be honest critics.
We're definitely not ruining it, though, because we can't even convince everybody in our own audience that this is what's happening.
That's true. We're probably granting them more narrative shielding to do this. They're like, go set it. Go forward with Operation Chechen Rug. I want to get to something that you brought up to transition this to Fortress America. Of course, we're going to get to the main topic as we're winding down the show. Very quickly, the two other contradictions I'd written down, we kind of addressed the contradictions in the anti-Maduro thing. One, color revolutions and NGOs, we both said this. If you're supporting the candidate that all the NGOs and color revolutionists are supporting, you might want to check your underlying premises. So we covered that. The third contradiction I wrote down was Sovereign Alliance and Peacemakers. Simple reverse indicator here. I'm not saying it's foolproof. I'm just saying I have seen the people I get annoyed at, the influence class I get annoyed at, and podcasters, and many of them happen to be Q decoders. To the idiot who made a sock account tonight, who came into chat and said that I wish Q was fake. I'll bang the drum for the 6,000th time. First of all, I've endorsed it like 3 times tonight. Ghost and I are going to do a whole show that's largely Q focused next Sunday night in a positive direction. And my most read feature I've ever written that is still pinned to the top of my Substack is We Are Q. So fuck you, you retard. You don't understand what's going on, or you're willfully ignorant. But a lot of those people have been promoting the drop that directly suggests that Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping are working with Donald Trump to rug pull the globalist establishment to defeat the New World Order. And yet they don't say anything about how Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin are firm Maduro allies and are firmly against Maria Corina Machado and are firmly against regime change in Venezuela. So how do you square that? Well, if you're one of those type of podcasters, you just don't talk about it. You allow that cognitive dissonance to hang out until somebody else, us, figure out what's going on, and then you copy the takes that we say 2 weeks later and pretend that a drop told you about it when it didn't. You didn't understand the drops. That's what's actually happening there. Because the drops did tell you what was going on. They did tell you the Sovereign Alliance is a thing. They just didn't use that framing, which means you should be able to do simple math. If Russia plus China equals Sovereign Alliance, what does Russia plus China plus Venezuela equal? Sovereign Alliance. It's actually not that hard. Like, the secret with this stuff is it's not as hard as some people make it for themselves. You can use simple reverse indicators. So, is it a contradiction that Donald Trump regime changed Venezuela in direct opposition to the Sovereign Alliance? No, it's not, because he didn't regime change Venezuela. He did a fake regime change in Venezuela, and if you don't believe that, then you don't believe that Trump is working on the side of Putin and Xi, which means you're going against a Q drop. See how these circles work? Like, you get yourself in all these Chinese finger traps if you don't actually try to figure out what's going on in these theaters.
Yeah, and it's just worth pointing out, like, this is a really interesting caveat that Matt Ehret put on my radar a long time ago, like 2 years ago. But the origin of Al Qaeda, like, who created Al Qaeda? I mean, obviously the CIA, but who specifically created Al Qaeda? Well, Zbigniew Brzezinski, Operation Cyclone from the 1970s, where he brought a Saudi national to Afghanistan, and he told everyone in the Middle East, hey, if you send your young men to Afghanistan to fight the Russians, we in exchange will build schools to educate your children back home. And those schools, of course, were madrasas, where very radical fringe forms of Islam were taught, radicalized the kids, and then they recruited out of those schools 10 years later to create Al Qaeda. Here's the picture of Zbigniew Brzezinski and a young Osama bin Laden. This is in the newspaper, and back in the 70s, talking about how they're going to fight those dastardly Russians together. Fast forward 20 years after this picture is taken, and you get a book that was written by Zbigniew Brzezinski called The Grand Chessboard. And the Grand Chessboard, this is 1998, he lays out what the future of the Middle East is going to look like, the future of the world, really, but the Middle East being the center of it. And
this was a preview.
He said the one thing we have to make sure does not happen, the only thing that could thwart our plans for world domination, is if an unholy alliance emerges between Russia, China, and Iran.
I called them the new Axis last year.
Which at the time seemed very unlikely, because Russia and China were not getting along. Iran and China were not getting along. Like, none of them were getting along. It did not, like, that's never going to happen. They're never going to team up. But then you look at everything that happened over the past 10 years. Why would Trump make the moves he's making? Why would he, rub up against the neocons? Why would he tell the lies that he's telling? Well, what was the net effect of him doing all these things geopolitically? It pushed Russia and China together. It pushed Russia and Iran together. It pushed Iran and China together. And all of a sudden, you have the one thing that the deep state openly said in 1998 can never be allowed to happen. And that's an alliance between Russia, China, and Iran. And what's now the counterbalancing force that's backing the new sovereign alliance and giving them actual power projection militarily? Russia, China, Iran.
Damn straight. Let me see. I can't find it right now. But yeah, I mean, I wrote Axis and Allies in July and said, look for the globalist regime to start branding Russia, China, and Iran as the new Axis. I was saying the new Axis, right? This was in July. And in September, The Guardian was the first to do it, which is probably, I would say, the mouthpiece for the globalists, not for the US globalists, but for the globalist regime. And they came out with that infamous op-ed in September that said the US and Russia, Trump and Putin are executing a pincer on the European Union, which I wrote in my very first article ever in the InfoWar. I said that they were executing a pincer on the globalists in the EU. So the Guardian got there 4 years later. But they also said they named Russia, China, and Iran the axis of upheaval. So I didn't guess the exact name. I don't know how I could have, but I did say they're going to brand them the new Axis, and that's exactly what they're doing. And to transition into the Fortress America kind of topic, we've sort of been setting this up with Venezuela, and we can even continue this next week.
Sure.
But I'm interested in, especially one of the points you ended on was about power projection. And you and I believe that there's this multipolar world, this sovereign world that is basically being coaxed into fruition. On an actual level, we believe moves are being made to rewrite the map, to redraw the map, so to speak. And on a narrative level, something like Maduro's regime change is one of the translation layers to that. That's kind of how I would frame it. But what I'm interested in is this macro regions of responsibility idea that we talk about. You often talk about it with, like Saudi Arabia would be this massive, the rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran has the potential to project this power, to project power onto that domain, kind of in the center of the map, right? We've got this Russia-China alliance that has the power to do that. Russia over Europe, essentially. China over the Pacific and even up into the Arctic. The US, China, and Russia up into the Arctic. But what seems to be going on in the early innings of 2025 is Trump's turn. I think he's starting to give us a preview that we haven't talked about a whole lot in recent years because we've been so focused on what Russia and China are doing and for you in the Middle East. But it seems Trump is giving us a preview of what I've seen some commentators refer to as Fortress America, which seems to be a narrative and a framing that is conducive, or that I should say is digestible to a lot of different layers of the collective mind, including neocons. So from an actual perspective, rarely on this show, what do you think Trump is setting up on the American game board? When I say America, I mean the Americas. How does a place like Venezuela, Colombia, and Cuba, maybe let's stick with those three for now, how would they play into this new vision of a sovereign region of responsibility if we're right about the multipolar world that's coming on the back of it?
It's such a good question. And like, I want to clarify, because people are going to say, well, wait a minute, why do we want Iran to be strong? Why do we want China to be strong? Why do we want Russia to be strong? Think about it. Like, people hear Trump use the term peace through strength, and they assume that that means America is going to be the biggest, baddest bully on the block, and no one's going to fuck with us because we have the biggest stick. Well, newsflash, everybody, that's been the dynamic of the world for the past 85 years. Like, we have been the biggest, baddest bully on the block, and nobody's fucked with us, because if they do, guess what? They're getting a bomb right up their ass every single time. And we have demonstrated that time and time again. So there's nothing new or revolutionary about peace through strength if the meaning of that is to build a strong American military. I do think that's the goal, to have a strong American military.
Yeah.
And that military has been gutted by the neocons and the deep state. However, if you actually think about a seesaw goes like this or it goes like that. But if you wanted to balance the seesaw to be perfectly horizontal, what would you do? You would have equal weight on both sides of the seesaw. Meaning, if there is a powerful military on that side of the world and a powerful military on this side of the world, like we had in the Cold War, what do you get? No kinetic conflict, right? Because I'm not going to go mess with him, because, yeah, I might be able to win, but he's going to give me black eyes. He's not going to come mess with me for the exact same reason, right? That is what this sovereign alliance represents, is we're not going to go send the U.S. military into the Middle East. You know why? Because not only are we going to have to fight Iran, which has a much stronger military than they did 20 years ago, we're also going to have to fight China. We're also going to have to fight Russia. And we're not ready to fight all three of them. We're not going to be able to win that war. So we're not going to do it. And that is the balance of power for future generations. So if a neocon ever did become president somehow, he wouldn't be able to do it even if he wanted to, because it's just not even an option, right? So to answer your question, how do you stop this in Venezuela, Colombia, this part of the world? You mentioned earlier the whole drafting thing, right? Like, yeah. we talked about Marco Rubio. We talked about taking neocon deep state plans. And I think a big thing Trump has done over the past 10 years is he's taken individuals who have individual ambition, things they want to do, and he's used that ambition to advance his agenda. Hey, this guy really wants to climb the ladder, so I'm going to plug him into this place. He's going to do everything I want him to do. Marco Rubio is going to do everything that I want him to do because he wants to be president one day. And he wants to prove himself to the American people and the world that he can do it. So he's going to do exactly what I ask him to do because he has to pay his dues, right? Well, look at what this guy, Howard Scott, in the 1930s developed. Howard Scott is credited with developing the technocracy movement. You've all heard that term, right? So the technocracy movement, which is a core tenet of Agenda 2030, the World Economic Forum's plan to take over the world, right? Regions of responsibility, but inverted. We're going to have technates everywhere. We're going to have a technate of America. We're going to have a technate of Europe. We're going to have a technate of Asia, right? And basically that technate is ruled by a strong central government. And then that strong central government answers to a global government that's located wherever. Jerusalem is most likely the location, maybe Brussels. But this is what the tech native America, according to this 1930s thesis, looked like. Look at it. Greenland, Canada, Cuba, Venezuela, Guyana, Colombia, all of Central America. What does this remind you of, BB? like this looks like what Donald Trump's been talking about doing, right?
Yep, the regime change. We've got Venezuela, Colombia, Cuba, and Greenland are the 4 that have been targeted on the map by Donnie.
In fact, all of the anti-Israel, anti-Zionist people, who are all very frustrated with me because I won't jump ship and turn on Trump. They've been talking about this for like 2 years now. Like where they're like, hey, like posting this map and being like, dude, he's doing exactly what he's talking like last year. And he was talking about promising to take Greenland. They're like, dude, this is like the technate plan. Like this is the whole globalist plan. Right. And then he's talking about Maduro and overthrowing Maduro. Dude, it's right there. It's like, yeah, it is right there, isn't it? And
it's just not what you thought it was.
It's just not what you thought. However, look at what Gustavo Petro just put out yesterday. He says, this is a post to X. This is the president of Colombia who just was invited to speak with Trump.
Right after Trump said he was going to take him out and bomb him. Said you better watch your ass. And then Gustavo Petro gives this interview to CBS the other night where he says, we spoke for 55 minutes and he let me talk for 45 of the 55 minutes. And it was very heartfelt. And I told him all about the cartels and what's actually happening. And he now understands all about the cartels. And then Trump made a post on True Social that said, just got off the phone with Gustavo Petro. I now understand the cartels. Yeah.
And
he went one step further. Trump said, it sounds like a lot of the stories told about you are the ones that are told about me.
That's
so
what
he gave you a hint. Yeah.
Yep. Trump said that was the exact quote was, it sounds like all the lies that, you and I both have lies that are being told about us by everybody.
Yeah.
Right. And so what Gustavo Petro says is this is Gran Colombia. It was Bolivar's idea. Bolivar was the guy in the 1800s who led the North South American colonists against Spain to overthrow the Spanish rule and liberate the countries. And he says, this is Bolivar's idea, and I propose by constituent vote of the population that we rebuild it as a confederation of autonomous nations. We would have common policies in the matters that the people propose. Undoubtedly, the commercial policy toward industrialization and being what is a geographically center of the world and of Latin America, a center of clean energies, of knowledge, of high technology infrastructures for mobility and communication. On those, there would be a Grand Colombian Parliament, a Court of Justice, and a government council like in the European Union or in the federal USA, a potential for tourism and for world connectivity. Now, I don't know if this is actually what's going to happen. I don't know if this is a good idea or not. I don't know. It's an interesting talking point, and it's an interesting point of discussion when you consider that the world was carved up by the globalists a century ago, and all these national boundary lines were kind of arbitrarily drawn by bad people, right? Especially in the Middle East and Africa. But what he's proposing here is to combine Colombia, parts of Peru, Venezuela, Guyana, Panama, parts of Costa Rica and Nicaragua, and then basically balkanize it into 14 different countries that would all operate under a confederacy, but they would all be autonomous. This is kind of how Russia operates as well.
Right.
But he's showing you that he intends to carve up Colombia too. Colombia becomes 5 different countries. So again, interesting. I don't know if it's the right thing to do, but it certainly is a counterpoint to a technate like what's being shown up here, which is the entire North American continent plus Venezuela, Colombia, and Guyana, and all of the Caribbean operating under one central government, which would be a very bad idea, right?
Right. And I think another way of reading this map is, and the inversion of it rather, is you talked about drafting. The idea being Trump using the setup of the enemy and then rug pulling it. This idea of Fortress America, to me, if you kind of look at that red and you think region of responsibility under our framing, and you think sovereign alliance, sovereignty, then it strangely, I think this is kind of the ultimate paradox at the heart of the sovereign alliance. I've often referred to the InfoWar and the truth community and a lot of the Q community in a positive way as a decentralized collective, a decentralized grouping of sovereign-minded individuals who are all moving forward under a unified moral framing, a moral framework. And the decentralization, that's kind of a paradox, right? Because you'd think decentralization reduces cooperation. That's what we've been brainwashed into believing, when most of us are understanding the entire foundation of the United States of America from the founding was actually built on the idea of a decentralized collective. It was not just the idea of a defense of individual liberties and sovereignty. It was the proving of the thesis that if you have a world of independent and free sovereigns, those sovereigns will naturally cooperate with one another for mutual benefit, mutual security, mutual gain. And that in a system like that, the reason I say it creates a paradox is because that system ends up unifying in a way that a centralized system never could. This is the entire idea behind the Bitcoin network. The idea is it's totally decentralized, and yet when you have millions and millions of nodes running that network, good, bad, or anything in between, those individual people, I mean, their moral compunctions, they become not dependent on the system, but the system and them become a perpetual feedback loop where they are incentivized to defend the integrity of the system. People that are bought into the network. Same thing with America. People that are bought into America gain by the gain of the other sovereigns in America. And if you look at that map that you just showed there, the techno-state version of that is centralized top-down control, Fortress America. I think what might be going on here is Trump essentially telling most of the story on the way to that, but the rug pull on the techno-state is Fortress America will be voluntary and sovereign. And I actually think a tell is what we might see in 2026 with regards to Canada. Narratives coming out of Canada. I've actually been looking into this lately, and it's interesting that you put Canada in there because they haven't been being talked about a whole lot lately. But I think the second half of 2026, they are going to supplant South America and all this in the North American, or rather in the American story, because Alberta and Saskatchewan are a lot closer to some sort of a sovereign secession movement than a lot of people are aware of. And is this going to look, at the end of the day, anti-Trump, anti-sovereign alliance propagandists or idiots are going to draw maps like the one you showed. Trump is becoming an emperor and a dictator. In actuality, that map is happening organically because the individual globalist nations are breaking up and joining a sovereign region of responsibility.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I think that's, again, I think it's just moves and counter moves, because I think people want to believe that this has all been just figured out and we're basically just watching, like we're just coasting downhill and this is all just going to be a smooth glide to the landing. I think if that were the case, then everything that would be happening now would be totally immoral. Like if we actually have already won and we're basically going through this charade for years and years and years, which is causing a lot of like distress and dissonance and psychological trauma, that would actually be very immoral and the juice would not be worth the squeeze. I think that the reason we're doing this is because this is still a very active, ongoing conflict, and there is an enemy that has a vote, and he is casting that vote every single day and trying to lead us back into the center of the maze. We'll talk about that next week. But one of the best examples of this is Argentina. Argentina is now becoming the proxy that is now that it doesn't appear that it's going to be working out with Colombia or Venezuela, with Colombia to go against Venezuela. Here's an interview that, everyone loves this guy, Milei. They're like, Milei. I've been very skeptical of this guy. And the reason I've been skeptical of him is because the IMF, Argentina was the number one debtor to the IMF the year before he came into office. He came literally out of nowhere, set the world on fire, set the internet on fire, gets elected, I'm going to be very based. I'm going to abolish all these agencies, whatever. He didn't actually do any of that, by the way. But the year before,
but he did the chainsaw thing. He was like,
it was very cartoonish, very cartoonish. I'll explain that in a second. But the year before, the number one debtor in the world, the IMF, which is the World Bank, it's like the Iron Bank from Game of Thrones, was Argentina. And the Argentinian legislature, Argentina at the time, very communist. It was a very it had gone from a capitalist to a communist system. But they passed a law, or passed legislation excusing everybody from paying taxes for 1 year. And they said nobody has to pay their taxes this year because hyperinflation is so out of control and everyone's so poor and this economy is such a disaster. And that means that the IMF didn't get any money that year. Their debt, zero service on their debt that year. So then all of a sudden, this Malay guy shows up. He says, I'm going to change things. And what he actually does, he abolished some of the more like superfluous, like LGBT stuff, like all that. But he actually took 60 of their government agencies and just privatized them. And he allowed these transnational corporations to come in and just buy everything. And I even asked ChatGPT, I said, run through and identify who are the banks that are, and the buyers who are purchasing these agencies. Are they connected to the IMF? Yes, they're connected to the IMF. I then found an article, let me see if I can pull this up, an article from 4 days ago that says that they are negotiating now right here. They're negotiating Central Bank of the Republic of Argentina. This is January 7th. A $3 billion repo. And I was like, that's weird. Okay. So I asked ChatGPT, I said, let me just share that screen. I said, who are the 6 banks? Well, the 6 banks are Deutsche Bank, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Bank of China, Banco Bilbao, and Banco Santander. Okay. So I said, would those foreign debt payments be to the IMF? Short answer, yes, mostly, but not only. And then the conclusion was, the bottom line is, yes, the IMF payments are a major reason Argentina needs these dollars. But the money supports all foreign debt payments, not just the IMF. So he's literally doing this just to pay back the transnational bankers. That's the whole point of everything he's doing, is actually to extract money from Argentina and give it to the IMF and give it to the transnational banks. It's very important to understand that. Yeah. And then I asked, did Malay recently sign a law allowing transnational corporations to purchase property in Argentina? You may have noticed that a few days ago, Trump signed an executive order saying that transnational corporations could not own property in America.
Opposite game.
Yeah. And it says, yes, but with an important detail. President Malay's government did not remove legal limits on foreign ownership of land in Argentina, which it says he did remove legal limits on foreign ownership of land in Argentina, which in practice allows transnational corporations and foreign investors to buy more property. But this change was made through a decree, an executive order, rather than a new law passed. And actually, he's now being sued by the legislature, who are accusing him of doing something unconstitutional. Okay. To that point, I have a clip here from a month ago, from December 9th, when they announced this so here's the clip. It's going viral across the internet today. So this is from December 9th.
Se libera la compra por en cuanto a tierras rurales.
He says, regarding rural lands, this is like his press secretary, the purchase by foreign private individuals is now allowed. The prohibition on changing the productive use of farmland for 30 to 60 years after a fire is also removed. Now, that's important. So what he's saying is that not only are we changing it so that foreign transnational corporations can come in and buy farmland, but there was also this really annoying law before that if farmland catches on fire, for 30 to 60 years after that forest fire, you can't change the zoning from agricultural to, mining or business or housing. It has to stay agriculture. We're going to get rid of that as well. Yeah. Well, turns out
a lot more fires are going to spring up probably, huh?
Well, it's not probably. Actually, right now, there are 80,000 acres of Patagonia, which is like some of the most pristine outdoor land, are on fire right now. And the allegation going around the internet is that these fires are all being started by Israeli soldiers. There, several Israeli citizens have been arrested for doing it. They found grenades, like incendiary grenades that are specially manufactured in Israel. There have been there's this guy Salgado who's out there doing these great stories on this, where he's interviewing all these like whitewater rafting guides who are saying, yeah, I was going down the river and I saw these people, so I pulled over, and it was a bunch of people, like Israeli citizens speaking Hebrew, and they had all this like equipment set up, like radio equipment, and they had a satellite phone, and they were like talking to somebody, and then they started panicking and speaking to each other in Hebrew, and they started packing everything up when I pulled up. And there's like videos of, you know, these guys speaking Hebrew, and this guy pleading with them, don't go start a fire in there, don't go start a fire. And then they walk down into the forest, and then later the forest is on fire. It's very strange. Like, so I don't know what the actual story is, but the allegation going around the internet is that Israeli, like IDF soldiers, are on the ground in Patagonia starting fires in Argentina. And then here's an interview that Milei just did on December 30th, 4 days before Maduro was arrested. And he says, it's in Spanish, so I won't even play it, but he says, Milei says, if Trump asks, we will help invade Venezuela. And the journalist interviewing says, well, did he ask you to do that? And he says, no, but we will do it right now if we have to. So like, he's offering up Argentina as the place they can do this. They can stage the ground invasion from into Venezuela. And by the way, like back in September, Milei signed this thing called the Isaac Accords with Netanyahu, which is the whole idea is to bring Argentina closer into a closer relationship with Israel. And Bolivia is now joined. And the plan from Netanyahu's perspective is to get every country in South America to join this thing. I'm not really sure what the like net effect of it's supposed to be, but this is very, like, Milei has been openly saying Maduro is a criminal. We need to overthrow him. Maduro has been the one saying that he's actually an agent of like the IMF and an agent of these like transnational bankers. So, you know, whatever the truth is, it's pretty sketchy.
Pretty crazy that Israel would want to cozy up to the hub of where we're told all the Nazis fled to after World War II. That's, yeah, you wouldn't think that the anti-Nazi place would be like, you know, I think there's some deals to be made with these people. Kind of strange. We won't go down that rabbit hole tonight, but it certainly exists. And I'm sure many people watching are thinking, if California Palisades bells started going off in your mind, that's what started going off in my mind. Chris Paul was talking about the California fires at the time in terms of California politics, you know, being used as a political statement. So, you know, he's done some writings and some commentary on that. But what this makes me think of is, you know, isn't it kind of funny that right now on the U.S. theater, we've got Trump, we've got the Somali fraud in Minnesota really being amplified to start off the year. Super amplified narrative, billions and billions of taxpayer dollars laundered, right? And I think the key to the narrative that you mentioned earlier tonight with Pam Bondi is that this is being investigated and NGOs are behind it. So we've got the Trump administration, the Trump DOJ, basically disclosing through the war of stories. Like they're always respond. This is how it works. They're always responding to the story, which makes you wonder how the stories are being seeded, which is why I do this show. So we've got Trump and team working on the back of that cultivated mandate, saying that the state of Minnesota, the states themselves are directly involved in the fraud, which means the states are directly involved in fomenting the issues that require the funding. And what state has Donald Trump been talking about more than Minnesota when asked about Minnesota? California. And he keeps saying, and the drop said, watch California. You know, there's many ways to take that. Everyone in this audience believes that California is arguably the most corrupt state in the nation. Gavin Newsom is obviously basically the forward-facing character that represents what's left of American liberalism and globalism. It's Gavin Newsom. He's the guy. And California is the state, biggest state in the country in terms of population, most powerful state in the country, you could argue, certainly in terms of business and economy. And we've got Trump highlighting that. Ghost lays out this template in Patagonia. And man, where else has really valuable real estate been burning that provokes funding from globalist institutions such as the US Treasury backed by the Federal Reserve? And if you wanted a narrative inversion in a good way to kind of get way more people on board with the Trump agenda, imagine Donald Trump disclosing or discovering through his DOJ that the Palisades fires in particular were caused by dark interests working on behalf of the state government of California. If Trump proves that to the most lefty, globalist-leaning billionaires in California, that it was the globalists who did this, then I think it kind of shows you just how many fronts this stuff's operating on and how Patagonia and Argentina are actually connected to California in ways that you wouldn't know unless you were retarded about this stuff, like our audience is. But the last little question I got here, it's a very small one, but you mentioned, and Ghost is going to be back next week. We're going to do, we'll probably do some more of this. We'll do whatever's going on in the week, but we're really going to get into that labyrinth idea, the InfoWar labyrinth, through the lens of the Q drops and really how Trump operates in the labyrinth, how different figures and factions operate within the labyrinth, and then maybe how we operate within the labyrinth and how you guys do. So that should be an interesting discussion, many different ways that can go. But yeah, the last note here, you mentioned Vladimir Putin's comments on international law, and that's been something I've definitely been keying in on lately. Donald Trump's talking about it. They're all talking about it. They're all talking about Trump's violations of international law. And you know, the secret is, you're welcome, Steph Asia. The secret is, I think, international law doesn't exist. And our premise, underlying premise of the target of the Sovereign Alliance is the rules-based international order. So in terms of Fortress America, in terms of the moves being made here, and more specifically, the reactions to Trump's moves by Xi and by Putin, talking about international law, do you see that in a similar way in terms of them all kind of doing this thing where they're posturing against Trump and saying he's violating international law, and yet we don't think the Sovereign Alliance really believes in international law in the way it's been used?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, it's being openly said now from all sides, and like Robert Fico is saying it, he's definitely Sovereign Alliance. He's the guy who was shot 5 times in the chest for outlawing foreign NGOs from operating in Slovakia in May. I think that was May of 2024. He said that the rules-based international order that was set up after World War II is crumbling. The German president, who's definitely deep state, said the same thing, that Trump is destroying the international norms and turning it into a den of thieves and bandits, which it always has been. But this only works if, like, the rhetoric Trump's using, where he's threatening like China and threatening Russia with kinetic action, it only works if those guys are on your side. Because if they're not on your side, then you're taking a big risk by like posturing like that, because you could, one wrong statement and one, Xi has a bad day and you say something the wrong thing, he could decide, fuck it, like, let's go in and take Taiwan, right? So it really only works, like the kayfabe or whatever only works if the two characters are in on it, like just like in real life wrestling. Like if they both understand that it's a script they're reading from, but the audience isn't supposed to know that, right?
Yep.
That's the only way that it works. So yes, I think they're breaking the public perception that there is such a thing as international law. There's not. There's no world government that enforces this. There is a UN, but the UN isn't really supposed to be a government. It's supposed to be a forum where countries come together to resolve their problems through their disagreements through rhetoric and not through kinetic action. That's supposed to be what the UN is. Whether or not that should even exist is a debate that's probably worth having, but it's not a government. It's not a world government. And without a government to enforce the law, there's no such thing as law, right? So the idea of calling it international law is stupid.
Absolutely. And I've only played it like a couple of times in a couple of years, or, you know, what's it been now? 3 years been at Badlands. But you queued it up. You didn't mean to, but I'm going to play a short clip that I used in the Righteous Russia series. In the article, Part 7 of Righteous Russia was called Power, because it was all about the power is power refrain that I believe Vladimir Putin, Donald Trump, and Xi Jinping are reminding the rules-based international order of. Now, the irony of this clip is you need to imagine the villain in the scene, Cersei Lannister, as being representative of the Sovereign Alliance, at least in the eyes of the globalists. So Littlefinger in this scene, Peter Baelish, he is the rules-based globalist international order. Cersei Lannister is the Sovereign Alliance. And this is essentially word for word what I think is transpiring and what Ghost just described.
The Mockingbird. You created your own sigil, didn't you?
Yes.
Appropriate for a self-made man with so many songs to sing.
I'm glad you like it. Some people are fortunate enough to be born into the right family. Others have to find their own way.
I heard a song once about a boy of modest means. Found his way into the home of a very prominent family. He loved the eldest daughter. Sadly, she had eyes for another.
When boys and girls live in the same home, awkward situations can arise. Sometimes I've heard even brothers and sisters develop certain affections. And when those affections become common knowledge, well, that is an awkward situation. Indeed, especially in a prominent family. Prominent families often forget a simple truth. I've found.
And which truth is that?
Knowledge is power.
So as a brief pause here, for anybody who is not a Game of Thrones fan before it completely destroyed itself in its final season, Littlefinger, the Mockingbird globalist, is trading in information right now. He is telling the interim queen, ironically enough, the acting queen, that he knows her darkest secrets because she's a member of a powerful family. And that because he has access to that knowledge, that is his power projection. And she can't do anything about it. And that's how he pulls the strings of all the royal families in Game of Thrones. So let's see how she responds to this.
Seize him. Cut his throat. Stop. Wait. I've changed my mind. Let him go. Step back 3 paces. Turn around. Close your eyes. Power is power. Do see if you can take some time away from your coins and your whores to locate the star.
So that scene has lived rent-free in my head for years.
Yep.
And
brilliant. It's a brilliant scene.
And, you know, I guess to tie a bow on what I think of Fortress America and largely what I think Putin's been doing, what Xi will do. He's not up to bat yet, but they've been ceding Taiwan mutually for years. It would be surprising if nothing happens there. But Donald Trump right now is on center stage, and you'll notice if you pay attention to the narratives out there, the people that hate Trump, the people that love Trump but think he's wrong, the people that love Trump and think he's right, all of them agree on one thing. What Donald Trump is doing right now is proving to the world that the rules do not exist, which is exactly what Ghost just said. What exists is power and the will to use it. You can like that, you cannot like that, but this is a complete paradigm shift of the rules-based international order. And it's why it's especially important to know what the people in power are doing. So, Ghost, thanks for joining me. I'm going to let you go and grab a couple messages from the people before I get out of here. I know you got some stuff to do. Ghost is taking lead on the Badlands news brief on Mondays. Ash takes it a few days. I take it. And Ghost and I, if you guys did not see, we actually just did the debut episode of the Badlands Blitz. Almost 300 likes on this thing, 71 comments, huge response from it. Really, really appreciate it, guys. This has been the first full week of the new Badlands brief. We've really tried to revamp this thing. We've tried to take Mockingbird Media kind of out of it and really just gotten to the heart of what the narratives are. Ghost, Ash, and myself. This was largely Ash's idea to revamp the brief like this. The response has been overwhelmingly positive. You guys are loving it. You'll see our takes in there every day. We see this as really kind of a briefing, a mission briefing for the day to come based on the previous day. And Ghost and I did the first episode of the Badlands Blitz, which is a 1 hour-ish podcast that goes out in video form and podcast form to your email. It's only on the Substack. So go to badlands.substack.com. This is going to air every Saturday. It's going to hit your inbox every Saturday. It's either going to be a rotation of the three of us, or I might host it most weeks, and Ash is going to join me next week, but you're going to see Ghost on there every other week. And people loved it. So we're trying to basically use it as a way of really making sure we refocus and do a rerun of the last week of commentary we did before just looking ahead to the next week. But what do you have to say, Ghost? I think it was pretty fun.
Yeah, man, it was fun to do the show, do that show, and obviously this show. I think the new format on the brief is great. I'm off now. I'm gonna go get it set up for tomorrow morning. So I'm gonna run and do that. But I look forward to next week coming back, and we'll probably finish up what we're discussing here and maybe talk about this labyrinth idea as well.
All right, man. Well, a labyrinth is not unlike our discussions, but hopefully in a good way for most people. All right, man. I will see you soon.
All right. See you later.
Thanks to Ghost. Yeah, thank you guys. I mean, we got a bunch of signups to the Substack. The Substack is free. Badlands.substack.com. The brief hits your inbox Monday through Friday every morning. And now the Blitz is going to be hitting your inbox on Saturday mornings. It's kind of a gap in coverage on Saturday morning, so we thought we'd fill that and do something a little unique and different. And people are really liking it. If you guys choose to support us over there with a paid subscription, we're kind of beta testing this. It takes a lot of work. I mean, Ghost is going to be up for the next however long. Whenever any of us is the lead on the brief, we're usually up until 3 a.m. or something writing that. And the Blitz, we're trying to fit that into the rest of the schedule. So when you guys sign up with paid subscriptions, that's the only way we can pay ourselves and the team for the time. But a lot of you are, and it's great. It's great to see the immediate response of like, yes, we're going to do a thing we think you will like. And then if you like it, you'll support it. And if you can't, then that's okay. Just like it and share it and enjoy it. That's how the whole business model here works. I know I'm going over on the boys tonight. Let me try to get my items out of the way ASAP. I'll read the rants here. Tom, terrific. $25 for the cause. Thank you, Tom. It's probably Tom Brady-com. I know that the Drake May-led Patriots won tonight. Tense game for a while. Defensive game. But he pulled it out, and Justin Herbert is a pumpkin. Turned into a pumpkin again. That guy sucks. You're not good unless you win playoff games. That's just how it works. And Cheney, $5. The best way to not be psyoped isn't by staying out of it, but by getting in so deep the psyop doesn't affect you. That's the Q movement. It projects outward. I would tell you that was the intent of the Q movement. I would not, however, suggest that everybody who follows it that applies to, because many of those people fall into every psyop that occurs. Sleep state, the worst thing about Trump's True Social posts are all the cavemen replies, usually with memes, calling for war or other retarded shit. Yeah. And most of the people in our audience are cute people. The show that's on right now that's about to air on Badlands is a cute show, because the people who have figured out what that was all for don't fall into those psyops, of course. The boys don't have to wait for me to finish. Brad, if you're waiting for me to finish, just start, and I'm going to raid you guys. I'll only be here for another few minutes. Start your show. Don't worry about me. I will raid over to you. Keith O'Higgins, I think the extraction and pickup of Maduro from Venezuela to New York was the ultimate. militarized Amazon Prime delivery ever. Burning Bright, if it's not MAGA coded, it will melt in your hands, not in your mouth. What a weirdo. Boom Diggity, $50. I often think about the time Gaddafi was to pitch his tent on Trump's property in Bedford. I never saw this Guardian article. Muammar Gaddafi's tent finds home on Donald Trump's estate. That is very interesting. I don't know if Ghost has seen that, but I'm going to send it over to him after the show. Thank you for the support. And Cheney, how about the kangaroos early on? I remember the U.S. would control them, or would they just be a central port of trade? Australia? It's another one that needs to be freed. Sleep State, Malay is a hardcore Zionist. That appears to be true. Sleep State, Ghost sent over a Substack. Unmasking the Flames, Israel's Shadow. He's probably read that, but I'll send it to him anyway. Thanks for the support, guys. If you watch on replay, shoot a boost over if you want, or don't. Hit the like button, please. Hit the thumbs up button. Tickets for GART Nashville just went on sale last night. Badlandsmedia.tv/events. We're going to Nashville April 9th through the 12th. I'm looking forward to that. I've never been to Nashville. I think it's going to be fun. The whole Bright family will be there. Hope to see a lot of you guys there. I know this is going to be a popular one because it's a great area, great venue from what I hear. So looking forward to that. And besides the Badlands Substack, the last thing I want to promote is this monster of an article. I don't know why I do this to myself, but I do. Sovereign Disentanglement, published today. I worked on this for a week. 9,300 some odd words. I probably shouldn't say that because then you guys won't read it, but the people who are reading it love it. Sovereign Disentanglement on Maduro and the Mad Kings of Multipolaria. As I said with Ghost on the Blitz, I genuinely think our minds operate in a different way when we're listening versus reading, and when we are writing versus speaking. And while some people like when I speak on these shows, I know some do not, more people like when I write. And I think and hope I've managed to put together a kind of different way of framing the Venezuela op, and how, more importantly, how it plays into the larger geopolitical chessboard that I think is going on. And you bet your ass we get Righteous Russia comms here. So please go over there, burningbright.substack.com. Just like on Badlands, all that stuff is free. If you choose to support it, then you're awesome. As I always say, next week we're going to be back with Ghost. I don't always say that, but I'm saying it right now. Ghost is going to be back next week. We're going to talk about the labyrinth of the info war. And we're going to go bicameral with it. As I always say, the war is a story. The story is a war. Act accordingly.
We were sleeping. I've been sleeping. I've been turning away from a truth I wanted not to face. There is a wound that won't heal at the center of the galaxy. There is a darkness reaching like rust into everything around us. We let it grow, and now it's here.
How many men have you killed, Malone?
I don't know.
50? 100? Countless.
Countless has a nice ring to it.
And how many lives have you saved?
500,000. Population of King's Landing. Tell me if your precious Randy commanded you to kill your own father and stand by while thousands of men, women, children burned alive, would you have done it? Would you have kept your oath then?
Our time has come. We prepared. We grew stronger. Were you rested in your cradle of power? You were trusted to lead the Republic. But you were deceived. You assumed no force could challenge you. And now, finally, we have returned.
The visions are clear now. I see possible futures all at once, Our enemies are all around us. And in so many futures they prevail. But I do see a way. There is a narrow way through.
It's not a prophecy. It's a story that you keep telling, but it's not their story, it's yours. They deserve to be led by one of their own. What your people did to this world is heartbreaking.
We gave them something to hope for.
That's not hope! We have survived by hiding from them, by running from them. But they are the gatekeepers. They are guarding all the doors, they are holding all the keys, which means that sooner or later, someone is going to have to fight them.
I wish none of this had happened.
So do all who live to see such time, but that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us.
Forgive me. I did not see. I have failed you all. You will bring me. Captain Armor, I do not know what strength is in my blood. But I swear to you, I will not let the White City fall. Our people fail. Our people. Our people. I wish you good fortune in the wars to come. And now it begins.
No. Now it ends.